please.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. We've got 23 members present in total, 12 members present in person here at Council HQ, being the Chair, the Vice Chair, Councillor Dashbar, Councillor Maureen Johnston, Councillor Scobie, Councillor Stevenson, Councillor Stitt, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Young. We also have present in the hall Julie Irvin, our teacher rep, Lisa Vinnie, our parent council rep, and Louise Church from the Youth Council. 11 members present on Microsoft Teams, being Councillor Brodie, Councillor Dougie Campbell, Councillor Dempster, Councillor Hill, Councillor Ingalls, Councillor Lowe, Councillor McGregor, Councillor McCammon and Councillor Walters. And on Teams we've got Stuart Clement, our teacher rep, Anne Barber, our church representative. I've got one apology from Councillor Lynn Davis, and 5 not present at the start of the meeting. Chair is Councillor Karen Crothers, Greg Black, our parent council rep, 2 church reps, and we've got 1 rep from the Youth Council not currently on the meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tracy. And I approve of members' remote participation. So, agenda item 2, declaration of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest or a statement of connection? I don't see anything in the room or online, so we'll move forward to the minute of previous meeting of the 22nd of April for approval. Do members approve these minutes? Yep. Okay. Agenda item number 4. Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing Revenue Budget 24-25 Outturn Report. Now we have Colin Pentland and Marcus Al-Sadi here to assist if members have any questions. So gentlemen, you're online. Do you have anything further to add to your report?
Nothing else to add, Chair. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
It's just to say I'm here and Marcus is as a substitute, Stephen White.
Sorry, Stephen, I had my glasses up and not down. It depends where I can see.
Yeah, absolutely fine, no problem.
No, that's it. Thanks, gentlemen. So I will move to member debate. Councillor Young. Microphone, Councillor Young.
Can I thank you once again for this report? Now you can hear me. Can I draw your attention to the appendix on page 35? And I've got a couple of questions here, if you don't mind. The first one, these are year-end service reserves, that's money set aside. Can I ask if the autism service plan delivery of almost £500,000 is in addition to the capital fund of referred, I think, in agenda item 10 further on in the paper? And my second question, if I may, Chair, further down that same table, English speaking for other languages, £360,000. Can I ask who delivers this very worthwhile? Is it community or is it in the schools?
Thank you, Councillor Young. Gentlemen, do any of you have answers to these 2 questions?
Yes, if okay, I will answer the first question, if that's okay. With regards to the 495,000, yes, I can confirm that is additional to the capital funding that's been discussed later on. Thank you.
Yeah, regarding the English speakers of other languages, sorry, I think I would need to defer that to the management team in terms of how that delivery is carried out, whether that's community or school.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we have Liz Manson to answer that question.
Thank you. Yes, so ESOL provision is carried out in a number of venues, but it is delivered by the Lifelong Learning Service, a mixture of volunteers and some of the lifelong learning staff.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Young?
Microphone on.
Sorry, I don't think it's during school times, but there may be occasions when they use a sort of community use of school facilities.
if I may, Councillor Young, this has been a very helpful synergy in our new directorate, where we've been able to look at English as an additional language and English for speakers of other languages, so that we can support both the young people and their families through our directorate work. So we are aware that across Scotland there's a significant increase in speakers of other languages, and therefore we have set aside some funds for next year in order to respond to that. In fact, I understand it was a point of debate at recent Solace and COSLA meetings. So we've got a significant increase in Dumfries and Galloway, and we have recognised that, and we will be looking across the directorate to support children and their families through the means that Liz has outlined. Thank you.
Does that answer all your questions, Councillor Young? Are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Julie Irving.
Thank you, Chair. I just noticed that it's the underspend of £501,000 by Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing Services. And then over the page at 4.3, there's a talk of the primary schools budget returning a small overspend this year, but it then goes on to talk about the estimated pressure with non-teaching staffing vacancies being experienced, which meant those posts were not filled, so there was money sitting, and that was offset against increased teaching supply costs. I'm really concerned that we are seeing more and more teachers off unwell with stress, but this is kind of hiding the issue almost, because had those posts been filled, there would have been an overspend. So it's really just a question, how are we helping staff to deal with the increased stress level, with the larger class sizes, with the increased additional needs, to reduce those staff absences, to ensure that the budget isn't impacted. And then my second question is to do with the table on page 28, where it talks about, it gives the closing balances, and it talks about the budgets for the year ahead. Now, I'm aware that some head teachers are offsetting costs year against year because they cannot afford the bigger items from their DSM, and DSM's being reduced again. So more and more of that money is being set aside each year, which limits what head teachers then have to spend on the yearly costs, so the jotters, the pencils, the bits and pieces that we actually need for teaching. So it's how that's going to be addressed, because it means that more and more of the PEF money is being used to shore up basic education instead of supporting those learners we're supposed to be closing that attainment gap for.
I'm happy to respond to the trade union colleagues here. And Julie, we know that budgets in schools are challenging. We recognise that. We are also aware that head teachers are able to defer spend by 2% on their DSM. So the balances have reduced because, yes, head teachers are spending more of their allocation within year rather than moving it year on year. But that's absolutely within the DSM items. You picked up in terms of teacher absence. So again, while it's not explicit in this report, it is explicit within our performance reports. So by no means is it hidden, but we are aware that teacher absence is increasing, as is absence in our non-teaching staff too, and that is part of the work that we're prioritising in the year to come, to look at how we can support teachers and non-teachers and be in work and happy in work. So while the absence levels are not explicitly in this report, it's the cost related to the absences, it is explicit within our performance reports. And we recognise that the financial climate for all public sector is challenging at the moment, and I continue to be very aware of the work that head teachers do to bring us in on budget year on year, and that is a significant task that should be commended. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Does that answer your questions? Difficult questions, difficult answers, but
it explains it. Thank you.
I think that's probably the best you can do with it. Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's becoming a standing question every time this report comes along. But we've had, on page 31, we've got an overspend for generic support for assisted learning support. And then we've got an underspend in all those targeted areas. you know, can we get some assurance that we've got the right people in the right place at the right time? Because going by these figures, we don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Is that?
This is a pattern we've seen. You're absolutely right, Councillor Stevenson. This is a pattern we've seen in recent financial reports, and it does indicate that the specialist services are that there are environments being made across the specialist services. I would hope that in later papers in the committee pack today, we'll have an opportunity to look at the review of our support and learner service, and hopefully we can provide some assurance as to we're making some projections as to where that money should be in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Are you happy with that, Councillor Stevenson? Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, it's on the same subject, and I just find it amazing that we're on an underspend and the figures are there. But I just wonder if we are getting it right for every child in terms of what the level of support that they need. Some one-to-one, I don't know if we're delivering that, which maybe reflects on the underspend. And it's really, you know, and as Gillian says, there's other items of business here today. But any representation that's been made to me, and I think we do need to look at this, then it's because that their child is not receiving the level of support that they believe that the child should. And I've looked at the first tier educational tribunal advice, and it's not unreasonable to provide one-to-one in levels 4 at least, if not 3. Yet I don't think that we are delivering as much as we should on a one-to-one. So while it's reflecting an underspend, I'm not sure that we are getting it right for every child, and maybe we could get a response to that in terms of identifying the number of hours a child needs in terms of level of support rather than just generic support. I think there's a big issue in there for education.
I understand, I absolutely understand that, Councillor Scobie. What's the actual question for Gillian there, just for clarity?
It's really just to ask if we are getting it right for every child. I know that the start reply is yeah, we are, but it's that level of support that children need in terms of the identified number of hours, and then that we are delivering rather than picking it up just on generic, and generic is on overspend.
Would Jim Brown here want to address that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the question, and I absolutely take the premise. The fact of the situation in terms of additional need is that this year, well, it changes every year, and this year what we've done is we've seen a significant increase in need overall. And we can speculate about what that might be, but we have recognised that need. And as such, I think as you point out, if we have a fixed allocation of resource, then that has to be spread more thinly. Your question is a without wanting to avoid it, is a difficult one, because actually to say, are we meeting need? Well, we are meeting need within the budget envelope that we are allocated, and we allocate it in accordance with, as you're aware, Councillor Scobie, the agreed protocols. And I think that comes also to Councillor Stevenson's point that what that does mean is sometimes what we'll do is we will look at, for example, moving resource from either universal to specialist or in the other direction. But what we have to do is obviously work within the budget allocated. So in a direct answer to your question, yes, we are meeting our statutory requirement. If there were more money, we would allocate that also. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Scobie, does that answer your question?
It partially answers it, and Jim does touch on it, and I raised this at the budget setting day, and we were waiting then for confirmation as to what additional money would be coming from the Scottish Government. I think we've had an indication as to what this is, and I think we do need, because what Jim's saying is we're working within a budget that's allocated, but we're not getting it right, in my opinion. We're not getting right for every child who needs that additional support. And I think that's reflected, I know Julie spoke earlier, but on the stress, and I just read, I think it was a week ago, how many of our ASL support teachers are suffering and under, and some may have gone off with that stress. I think it's an issue that we've got to look at and to reflect that maybe there is indeed a lot more money needed to get it right for every child. That's my point.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I think we all know we're not getting it right for every child, but that's not what my question is. It's on page 27, 4.13, and it's regarding the additional agreed resources of 500k. I'm just wondering if that was well received and if that has actually made a difference. Thank you.
I'm happy to take this in the first instance, and that yes, indeed, the additional resource has been well received by our secondary school colleagues, and the exam results will be out in August. So the targeted 500,000 was allocated to secondary schools who had the highest pupil-teacher ratio. So we targeted those who have the fewest teacher in relation to the pupils that they serve, and those staff were deployed to support individual groups of learners specifically to raise attainment, and the outcome of that will be clear once the Curriculum for Excellence levels and the National Examination diet is reported later on this year. Thank you. Jim?
Thank you, Director, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the question. First point was that sort of gratefully received. Absolutely it was, you can imagine. Those head teachers were extremely grateful for that additionality. It came at a time in the year as well when you'll appreciate that course structures, curriculum offers were already determined. What that meant was that you could have intervention groups. So what we did was, in order to gain a sense of what the impact of it might be or was, we asked the head teachers to give us a clear rationale for what they were going to use the additionality against. And that had to be measurables. So for each of the settings that we had the additional resource, we have got a set of criteria that they themselves said we will use these staff in this way. So what will happen, exactly as the Director says, when we get the outcomes of this year's SQA diet, we'll be able to look at those intervention groups and say, specifically for those groups. You'll understand that, of course, that it would not be reasonable to say, well, is there an overall improvement on other areas, because these were very targeted teachers because of the nature of the time of year when they were introduced to the workforce. Thank you.
You happy with that, Councillor Wilson? Thank you. Julie Irvine back in?
Thank you, Chair. It was really just in response to what Councillor Scobie was saying there. I appreciate the Education Department. Your job is to deliver within a budget. So as a primary teacher, representing the primary teachers here, I feel it's almost my job to say we would like more budget, because our council officials can't say that to the councillors, because their job is to deliver within a budget. So actually, as a primary teacher who has a full-time class commitment, who has a variety of needs in our class, I can tell you that I would love to have an extra pair of hands to help my level 4 child who is currently not supported most afternoons of the week. But there are also other children within that class who, with a little bit of additional input in a small group, we could raise attainment. But the support staff in school are spread so thinly. They are working to capacity with children with high tariff additional needs. And we have a little group of children who need that small amount of input. We cannot target them because they're not PEF children. So they're the ones who are missing out. We can target our PEF children. We can target those high tariff level 4 children if we've got the bodies on the ground. But it's those other children in the middle who just need that short intervention, maybe a 10-week block of literacy or numeracy, that would have the biggest impact. And those are the children we cannot target. So if you want teachers to raise attainment, if you want to bring down stress levels, please give the Education Department more money to support learners.
Thank you, Julie. I know that wasn't a question, it was a plea, and it's very much noted. So, anyone else? Councillor Stett.
Thanks, Chair. It's on page 27, 4110. It seems to be ongoing in every department within the council, but we're still trying to fill vacancies. How many vacancies are we talking about here?
Stephen and Colin, are you able to put a figure on that? I'm aware that there has certainly have been 3 vacancies that I'm aware of. They're relatively small vacancies, and recruitment does take time, but perhaps, Stephen, Colin, you might have more specific information.
No, sorry, John, I don't. You're right. They're the levels that I'm aware of. As you say, there is quite a lot of turnover as well within some of these departments, and also the impact of recruitment. And the service have been actively recruiting to these vacancies. So I do appreciate a lot of the underspend within the Thriving Communities Directorate is associated with staffing vacancies. But as I say, the service are actively trying to recruit and deal with the challenges that we're seeing council-wide in terms of skill shortages and the likes. But I can definitely get a more detailed list of the vacancies and cascade them to members after today's session, if that would be helpful, just so that there's a awareness of what's there. But as I say, it is a changing picture constantly, because as I say, the service are doing a lot of good work in terms of getting the recruitment underway and moving forward.
Thank you, Stephen. I know this is an issue that's raised in committee time and time again about underspends and vacancies, etc. But Councillor Stitt, are you happy with that?
That's fine, Chair, thanks.
Yeah, so we'd really appreciate that list. Thank you very much, Stephen. Anyone, any other questions? Okay, I'll go to recommendations. Members are asked to note that an underspend of 501,000 was returned by Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing Services for the financial year of 2024-25. Note the underspend of 501,000 has been transferred to the earmarked committed funds held by Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing, and note a closing balance of 849,000 in relation to the devolved school management accounts, with a 352,000 being transferred out of this account in 2024-25. So, agenda item number 5, Community Asset Transfer Annual Report. We have Liz Manson here to assist if members have any questions. Liz, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, yes, Chair. This is a routine retrospective report, comes to you every year, as you'll guess from the word annual. And I have 2 comments. One is just an update in item 4.14 and item 10 in the annual report itself. Members of the council will be aware from the full council meeting that not only were we a finalist in the UK awards, but that we won. So that will be updated for the published report. And the second point is simply an acknowledgement for during the reporting period, Jamie Ferguson provided the leadership for community asset transfer, and I would just like to pay tribute here to the work that he has done and the success achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. That's fantastic. Do members have any questions? Open up to debate. Councillor Young and then Councillor Dashford.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your Excellence Award. Very well deserved, and it's a very positive report we're reading in front of us. Can I draw your attention to page 41, item 6? And I'll just quote, legal services charges required to be met by a community transfer body unless it meets certain criteria in which a reduction or waiver may be implied. This is aligned to the budget saving agreed in February 2025. CAT transfer took place, I think, in 2022 locally. A community body negotiated a 25-year lease on a council-owned property. That lease is still unsigned because the community body are unhappy with being charged 50% of the legal costs to do with the process. So can I ask if this budget saving or budget agreement is applied retrospectively back to 2022, or is there a start date for having the community bodies engaged in the CAT charged legal costs? Thank you.
Liz, can you come in there?
Yeah. So legal services are working on a briefing note at the moment, which will be coming out very shortly. But it has been custom and practice in the past not to charge legal fees, although the council has always had the right to do so. But I think the council's budget situation has made that there is a requirement now, I think, to pass on some of these fees to community groups. So it is something that legal services are actively looking at the moment, and we hope to have clarity in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Young?
Not quite, sorry. I asked if it's been charged retrospectively. This process the community group thought was completed in 2022. There was no mention of legal costs in any of their documentation, as far as I'm aware, or as far that has been reported to me. So I personally think it's a bit unfair if they're being hit by unexpected legal costs 3 years later.
We can certainly pass that on to legal colleagues, but obviously it's still a live negotiation at the moment, even if the decision was retrospective. It was taken some time ago, but certainly very happy to pass that on to colleagues in legal services.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Dashbar?
Thanks, Chair. Just on the back of Councillor Young's question there about legal fees and such, 4.20, page 40, says that information on that will be added to the website. Has that been done yet?
Not as far as I'm aware, but we do know that legal services have been working on the wording.
And just on in regards to page 47, which goes on about, it says that when an expression of interest is made, they get support for 6 months for the cap. How good are officers at renewing that every 6 months and you know, having those conversations with the groups every 6 months? Or do we just have some expressions which seem to go on forever? I know I've got some in Ward 1 which you might be familiar with, which, you know, every update it's the same thing, and there's nothing that ever changes in the ward officers update. So thanks.
And that is a difficult situation. It's a subjective judgment, and what we try to do is, if a community group is making progress, that they are applying for the external funds, that they are doing community engagement, that we can see that they're working on their development plan, that we will continue, their business plan, that we will continue to give them support. But it's very difficult, obviously, to withdraw support from a group that is doing its best. But I think we do recognise that, you know, we have finite resource, so it's a subjective judgment that the ward officers make.
Thank you, Liz. And can we maybe have a little a way to speed on that information going on the website? Because the quicker and better that the community is informed about, especially if there's fees, then the better. Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't actually got a question. It's just more of a comment. So thanks very much for the report, Liz. And just to put on record our thanks to the ward working team who work really well and really support the groups that come forward with CAT to do a CAT transfer, and it was very much deserved award, and totally echo your sentiments about Jamie Ferguson. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, and I fully 100% agree with you with that. Any other questions? No? Then we'll move on to recommendations. Members are asked to, 1, note the background in relation to the Council's Community Asset Transfer Annual Report of 2025, agree the Community Asset Transfer Annual Report for 24-25, and note the future developments and next steps as set out in paragraphs 4.16 and 4.23, which will inform next year's annual report. So, agenda item number 6, Dumfries and Galloway Coastal Benefit Fund Monitoring Report. And we have Derek Heck still here on Teams to assist if members have any questions. Derek, do you have anything to add to the report first?
Good morning, Chair, morning members. Just a quick typo to admit to in section 3 of the executive summary. In the last sentence, members will have noted that it does say that there was only one project received an extension. However, in paragraphs 4.6 to 4.8, there are actually 3 projects. So just to highlight that to members, Chair, but nothing further to add, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that update, Derek. Do members have any questions for Derek? Councillor Dashford.
More of an observation or tongue-in-cheek question, really, but page 51, 4.2 at the bottom says that due to a rounding issue, there was a 5p deficit in the payment. Have we accounted for that 5p?
Accounted in which way? Derek, do you want to respond to that?
Thanks, Councillor Dashbar. Yes, to me as well, Councillor Dashbar, every penny's a prisoner. And unfortunately, we were notified by the Scottish Government that we were getting 5 pence more, but when they actually paid it, we received 5 pence less. It was something that highlighted the Scottish Government, but I didn't receive a response.
Interesting question, no, Councillor Dashbar. Does anyone else have any questions for item 6? No, just a 5 pence question, Derek. That seems to be all you're getting today. So move to recommendations. Members are asked to note the performance monitoring information from projects, initiatives that receive support from the Coastal Benefit Fund in round 5. And note that almost 650,000 was awarded from the fund in round 5, which included match funding, saw investment of almost 1.4 million in projects delivering direct benefit in coastal communities across Dumfries and Galloway. And note the delegated decisions as outlined in paragraphs 4.5 to 4.8. Thank you. Agenda item 7. Dumfries and Galloway Council participation requests annual report. Do we have Kirsty Peden online or in the room? Oh no, it's Liz. Liz is here today to answer any member questions. Liz, do you have anything to add to this report? No? Okay, we'll just move straight to member debate. Do members have any questions for Liz? Councillor Dashford.
Yeah, thanks for the report. 4.10, page 109, says that there's a review and we're intending to complete it by the end of 2025 for our current strategy and procedure. Is that still on track, and can it be added to the forward plan, if so? Thanks.
Yes, we're certainly on track. The Scottish Government had produced a findings report, as you'll see in 4.2. So now that that has been published, we're able to continue with our report. And yes, it will be added to the forward plan. Thank you.
You happy with that, Councillor Dashford?
Yeah, no, that's great, thank you. And just as a sort of daft laddie question, why is the number of participation requests so low, not just in the council but nationwide? What are the challenges exactly?
Participation requests are it's a statutory right for an organisation, a community group, to get access to involvement in some work that a public body is doing. So conversely, if the public body is including people and inviting people to contribute and has got a range of mechanisms as we have, things like ward events, community conversations, then the requirement for a community group to use a statutory route to get that involvement is likely to be less. So we have certainly fulfilled all the requirements to promote participation requests, but because organisations have got other ways in, that's why it's been less.
Have Councillor Walters.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just a couple of questions about this. On page 108, near the top of the 4 bullet point down, where they're describing various things about this scheme, it says many public service authorities believe that PRs should only be used when informal engagement has failed, and therefore do not proactively promote them. I just wondered if that was actually our council's policy or our council's view, or do we have a policy in terms of actually promoting them? And the second question, which is on page 113, where it talks about right at the bottom, number 5, it says the outcome improvement plan was agreed on the 12th of June, and it will be published once feedback has been received. I just wonder where this feedback is going to be coming from. Is it going to be coming from the organisation that is involved, or is it coming from ward members or officers? Thanks.
Liz? Thank you. So yes, in response to your first point, no, we do promote participation requests. Local authorities generally have promoted participation requests. It tends to have been the other public bodies that have not been as active in that. So local government perhaps is more used to promoting and encouraging involvement from other partners than perhaps some of the other statutory bodies. So we do that, and we have the information on the website. With regards to the actual process, which is detailed on page 113, it's the community group that has the opportunity to respond and give feedback on the outcome improvement plan. There's statutory timescales associated with participation requests and a procedure that has to be followed. So I think, in fact, the meeting is today with Lower Burn Community Council about the feedback on their White Sands participation request.
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Walters, are you happy with those responses?
Yeah, I'm very happy. Thanks very much.
So, Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, I'm just looking at the number of community representatives we've got here this morning. And I just wonder how this participation request impacts the process in terms of this on our current situation with schools, mothballing, community impact assessment and so forth, whether we do promote this enough, and that's no criticism, in terms of participation requests to get an early start on the community involvement and participation in whatever is happening to their school. Has it got an impact on, if communities were to request this in terms of community impact assessment?
So community impact assessment isn't necessarily a part of the participation request process, but it is available to any group for any aspect of council business. But what we tend to find is that the other routes are more successful and more popular in the way that they are undertaken. Because this is a statutory process, it is quite a bureaucratic process, but it is there nonetheless should a community group feel that they want to take this on.
Thank you, Liz. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, it's just this, the promotion of that, notwithstanding what statutory requirements are needed, as indeed it would be in any closure to school, but it's that part before it in the communities exercising their right under statutory requirements.
Well, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Nope. Well, I'll move to recommendations. 1. Note the background in relation to the Council's participation request annual report. Agree the participation request annual report for 24-25. And note the developments and next steps as set out in paragraphs 4.9 and 4.10, which will inform next year's annual report. So, agenda item 8, Dumfries and Galloway Physical Activity Strategy. It does say in the published report title that it refers to the Dumfries and Galloway Event Strategy. This is actually an error. It is, in fact, the report relates only to the Dumfries and Galloway Physical Activity Strategy. So apologies, members. We have Lee Seaton and Lynn Mann are here to assist members. If there's any questions, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add. Happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Do members have questions? So, who's that? No.
Youth Councillor Church.
All right. Youth Councillor Church.
Good morning. It was just about page 141 about the barriers for school-age children when it comes to physical activity. Is there a way we're trying to break down them barriers or a way to get rid of the whole stigma around exercise? Is there a plan you're putting in place to hopefully just try to eliminate that?
Thank you. Lee?
Thank you. Very, very important question, because we do know from our school surveys that we do that we're seeing figures of around 50% of our children and young people that are achieving the physical activity guidelines. So it's a particular area that we wish to see improvement in. So like many parts of Scotland, we're very fortunate. We've got our Active Schools programme that I'm sure you're familiar with. So with the development of this strategy with our NHS colleagues and our council, it's split into to 8 areas that are following some guidance from Public Health Scotland, but one of those is around physical activity in that school and education setting. So our Active Schools team are tasked from this point as we go forward to look at what our physical activity plan for that particular area are. There are 8 aspects to this strategy, and that area around young people is one of them. So each of those 8 areas will have their own dedicated plan for how we now go and improve those rates further. And that dialogue with young people will be particularly important as we take that on. But the starting block we've got that is very positive is we've got a commitment and a 4-year investment with Sport Scotland for Active Schools to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Are you happy with that response, Louise? Thank you. Members have any other questions? Councillor Dashver.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a really, really great report, actually, and the plan's really, really detailed. I was just reading it, and it says it's estimated that more than 100 deaths in Dumfries and Galloway annually could be estimated down to low physical activity. So that's really quite something, and a point of concern, really. In terms of questions, I was looking at 4.17 on page 118, which goes on about our implementation plans, which will be developed, I'm assuming, for the relevant services. So my question is, what oversight will elected members have over those specific implementation plans to implement the actions that we're talking about here? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dashver. So, as with any strategy, first and foremost, governance will require us to bring appropriate updates back to committee intervening periods. I'd be very keen to look at, during the life of this strategy, to have some member seminars, particularly around this aspect, so that we can share with members where our progress is and perhaps where we can get some additional input. So I'm happy to commit to that way forward. Thank you.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Dashver? A member seminar does sound like the way forward for this. Thank you for that, Lee. Councillor, anyone else? No. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Lee, and I echo my fellow councillors' comments regarding what an excellent report this is. I'm aware that there's a waiting list of over a year for swimming tuition in Dumfries and also in Castle Douglas. Can anything be done to try and shorten the wait for swimming lessons? Are we needing more instructors?
Thank you, Councillor Young. Yes, so that's a variable picture across the region. The positive news I can say is that the biggest challenge for us is in terms of recruitment and retention of swimming teachers. So you're quite correct in that regard. Previously, to undertake a swim teacher qualification, our authority would require a national tutor to come to our area and deliver this course, which can take up to 80 hours in total. That in itself, because our geography creates the challenges to secure that resource. So we have now a D&G member of staff from DG1 who is presently just completing that national tutor qualification. In fact, is due to deliver the first test course over the summer period. That will allow us now to have a national tutor locally to deliver our own local courses and train significantly more and with greater ease and without barriers than we've ever had before. Thank you.
That's excellent news. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young, and thank you, Lee. So we have this, we'll have sort of an on-site person who can train. Do we have a list of instructors in the waiting, eagerly waiting this training from our trainer that we'll have now?
Thank you. Yes, so for the course that we've got is the pilot course for this particular new tutor. Yes, we have that course filled from internally across our own council staff makeup of casual, part-time and contracted. But my colleagues across the leisure estate are working with the college in particular to look at how we can get that pathway for some young people to get that additional qualification.
That's excellent, Lee. Thank you. I think Gillian wishes to come in also.
Thank Thank you very much, Chair. I would just like to thank our NHS colleagues for the joint preparation of this report and strategy, and members may be aware that there was a meeting yesterday of NHS board members and IGB board members which looked at the Public Health Improvement Framework recently published by government, and also the Public Service Reform Guidance, much of which talks around preventative approaches. So I expect to see much more of this strategy coming forward in terms of physical activity in Dumfries and Galloway, and thank you to our NHS colleagues for support.
Thank you for that, Gillian. Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, I wonder how much we're doing for kids who are profoundly disabled, and whether the strategy meets that need for kids who may not fit mainstream activity, but do require that level of support and availability of sport and activity. I know I met with a group at a ward event, and they're particularly concerned because they feel excluded from some of these activities. And I know we've got a disability group in Stranraer, and I'm sure there'll be throughout the region, trying to involve, and I know some of them are in bowling and different things, but it's the ones who are profoundly disabled. How much do we give attention to that cohort of kids?
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. So you're correct with your reference there to local disability groups. So we have in our region, Dumfries and Galloway Disability Sport, and our council employs two disability sport officers for the east and the west of the region. So that particular, within the resource available to them, and it is proportionate in terms of what it is that they can achieve, bearing in mind the geography of our region. But very much I would be expecting and supportive of us working with all of the aspects of our young people who have got any particular needs. But if that particular group, Councillor Scobie, that you're referring to, feel that they're not getting the support, I'm very happy. Just contact me directly and I'll follow that up for you.
You happy with that, Councillor Scobie? Thank you for that offer, Lee. Any other questions from members? Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just a last minute one. Lee, me and you have discussed it before regarding looked after children and how much we support social work services. How closely are you now working together? I know there was an issue with the swimming, but I'm not going to go into swimming, you'll be pleased to know. And I am pleased to hear that all the other stuff we've talked about is now coming to fruition with that. But just on the subject of looked after children, I just wondered how closely we work with that service. To be able to support them into looked after, into active travel and sports and things. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. So we continue to have, just for members' reassurance, I hope, we continue to have certainly an offer across our leisure estate where we provide the free access for our looked after children to all our leisure activities, including across our memberships. Certainly when we look to do, for example, the Summer of Play funding that we get, where we look to offer further activities, that's a particular group that we're looking to engage with. But I guess similar to Councillor Scobie, if there's examples out there that you feel in your ward or wider that's not happening, I'd be really pleased to hear about them individually and get my staff to follow up.
Thanks for that, Lee. Are you happy with that, Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to pick up Billy out with the meeting, but I do know that, and it's not just with sports and things, but I know foster parents and the like sometimes just don't know about things, and I don't feel as a council we actually approach them enough to offer that support in the first instance, and I think that's something that maybe we could look at a wee bit better. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Stevenson. A very pertinent point. Karen, do you wish to come in on that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate that the Care Experienced Education team and the work that they do with our looked after young people are actively promoting all of the work that Sport and Leisure do for them, and for the opportunities that are available through the support workers, through the teachers, and through their interactions with them on a more informal basis in school and out of school.
Thank you for that. You happy with that, Councillor Stevenson?
Sorry, I don't want to turn this into a social work meeting, but just in terms of kinship carers, is that same support offered as well? And is there an amount of communication happens between the support network, between the schools and the kinship carers and looked after children?
Yes, in a nutshell, of the care experienced education team, we don't differentiate between the children and young people that we support. So we support young people who are currently looked after, who are care experienced and who are experiencing kinship care.
Thank you, Karen. That's quite assuring, isn't it, Councillor Stevenson? Councillor Dempster.
Morning, Chair. Thanks very much. It's an observation. I don't expect a response today. But last year, when the Swimming for Disabled programme was distributed, every event was taking place in DG1. And I don't think it's helpful that the folk that are disabled, the first thing they have to do is travel 30 or 40 or 50 miles to access a facility when we have facilities scattered across the region. So just a reassurance from someone that disabled sport is not just simply restricted to Dumfries, and that it's shared across the wider Dumfries and Galloway region. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster. That's something to note. Lee, do you have anything to come in on that?
I'm not familiar with the specifics, Chair, but I'm very happy to go and speak to my swimming pool team leaders and come back to Councillor Dempster and the wider committee.
Very much appreciated. Any other members have questions? Oh, Councillor Walters.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just on page 133, there's the question, how active is the Scottish and Dumfries and Galloway population? And there's lots of interesting statistics there. I just wonder, is there any way in this that we can compare ourselves or benchmark ourselves against other rural authorities? Because obviously there's a big difference between ourselves and other authorities in Scotland. It'd be helpful to see how we compare. I wasn't sure whether that was in some of the reports. And of those, of the top 4 bullet points, the last one says 75% of adults in Dumfries and Galloway do meet muscle strengthening guidelines, increasing risk from falls and frailty. So is that saying that 25% of adults in Dumfries and Galloway do not meet muscle strengthening guidelines, increasing risk from falls and frailty? That's my 2 sort of questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Waters. Well, I would be hoping that we were comparing with others. So you want to come in, Lynn?
Yep, no, happy to answer. Thank you for the question. So we are working really closely with all local authorities across Scotland. This whole system approach has been through Public Health Scotland, so we are aligned and we meet regularly with our national bodies as well as linking with local authorities and NHS boards across Scotland. So that data is available and we are looking at that as part of our process. For the muscle strengthening, it is that 25% of our adult population are meeting the muscle strengthening guidelines, so 75% aren't. That does drop for older adults, so only 25% are meeting the guidelines, and we know that muscle strengthening, the alignment with that and the risk of falls and frailty is large. So there's a huge amount of work for us to do in the muscle strengthening part.
Thank you for that. Are you content with that response, Councillor Walters, or you need to come back in?
Yeah, just so sorry. So that's a typo then. It says 75% of adults in Dumfries and Galloway do meet muscle strengthening guidelines. So we're saying that 75% of adults in Dumfries and Galloway do not meet.
Yes, it's only 25% do. So
right. That's what I saw. Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. Do we have any further questions on this item? Okay, we'll move to recommendations. 1, agree the Dumfries and Galloway Physical Activity Strategy 25 to 30. Note that the Dumfries and Galloway Physical Activity Strategy 25 to 30 will be presented to the next meeting of Dumfries and Galloway Community Planning Partnership for endorsement in October 2025. Thank you. Move to agenda item number 9. Additional Scottish Government support for learning, ESFL funding, and we have Hugh Smith and Jim Brown here to assist. If members have any questions, gentlemen, do you have anything to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, and we'll start off with Councillor Scobie.
I'm sure there were more wanting to come in on this one, Chair, and just to reflect on what Jim said earlier, if they had more money, they would do a lot more. If the budget was there, now here's an opportunity for us to direct that 718,000 into, as it says on page 172, under bullet point 1, funding should be used to help improve outcomes for all children and young people with ASM. So in that respect, I would hope we are, rather than note, that we clearly give a direction here today that this is put into those children who need that additional support in education. If not, then not only are we not getting it right for every child, but we are failing. I fear we are failing a number of children who may not get the level of support that they require because of budgetary constraint. So in that respect, Chair, I would change from noting to directing to agree that we give this 718,000 to additional support needs, and it may start to address what Julie was talking about in terms of the number of ASLs that we employ to deliver this service. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. No. Is it Councillor Lowe?
Thank you, Chair. As elected members, we've been receiving a number of emails from parent councils and parents concerned at the drop in learning assistant support in their schools. But we didn't get that information. And so I did in the MES, and it came back and the reason came out support for stage 4 and stage 3s. Please, could we request this for the schools in our wards for the current allocation now, this term, what they're getting in August, and if admissible, percentage or number of pupils who have an assessment of any sort from stage 1 to stage 4. So that's an action that I'd like to request. And a linked backup question, if that's okay. Mrs. Irvin alluded to this earlier, that some targeted early intervention can make a huge difference. If we're going to put all our support focusing on stage 4 and stage 3s, what problem do we give ourselves in the future? It makes such a difference if at stage 1 and stage 2 pupils have some support. It's really a spend to save. But it appears to be that a solution for the here and now, because of a particular group of pupils, is going to give us a massive financial problem in the future. So how can we ensure this early intervention is given? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. And I know this is a point of discussion quite many times before in committee, but I'll hand over to Jim for this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lowe. I think for the detail, I will pass over to you. But I think in the broad brush, I agree with the premise that early intervention is the way to go. I think the way we've described our early intervention is through the Framework for Inclusion, which looks at long-term professional learning, rights-based approaches, parental involvement, and that will have the impact we require. What you will see from the graph on page 174 is that, related to the point I mentioned to Councillor Scobie previously, there is a recognised increase in need, and that describes how young people moving from primary to secondary schools, we've got a number of increased placements in our learning centres, to the extent that we have now got 3 additional learning centres. So you can appreciate that with the static resource, the resource has to be allocated initially against the young people with the greatest level of need, and that's exactly what we've done here. And so you can see the simple point here is that with an increased need, which is described clearly through the data, we have to put the money where it is most needed. That is not in any way to dismiss the point being made in relation to early intervention. It's simply saying we have to allocate the budget we have. And in terms of the long-term position, that's described here through Framework for Inclusion. Happy to pass to either of my colleagues.
Thank you, Jim. Does anyone else have anything to add? Hugh, do you wish to come in?
We can pull that information together for elected members, and I think generally what we've provided in the past to elected members has been what we allocated last year, what we allocate this year, and we can break that down by wards as well, and also give them the numbers in terms of the stages of stage 3, 1, 2, 3 and 4.
Thank you, Hugh. Although I'm in full support of that, and Councillor Lowe makes a very pertinent point, is there a risk sometimes where we would identify in smaller schools? What do we do in those situations?
We would blank those out because there's a minimum number that would actually indicate individual children.
Thank you. It's just in case when members get that list of some blanked out, it's just that that's already going to address their concerns and why that is. So no, thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Lowe?
I can understand it's all about budgets and economics, but I'm just wondering, those of us who are councillors in the future, what are we going to be having to deal with? And I think it's just a prevention thing for me and that intervention and how we can do that. There's no easy answer other than more money, but just something to be aware of.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe, but when it comes to what councillors are going to have to deal with, more money is probably down to us. Budgets. Right, Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. At 4.2 in page 172, one of the principles for use of funding is funding should be used to help improve outcomes for all children and young people, and should build on existing spend on inclusion to ensure the broadest possible reach. At 4.12 in page 173, we then say this approach releases funding that can then be redirected. So that seems to be in direct contradiction from what the funding's actually supposed to be here for. I've got a couple of recommendations to add later on at the end. I can go through them depending on how the debate goes. But then we then take, hang on a minute, 83,000 out for the violence in schools principal teacher. But I mean, you could look at this and think that it's a job for the boys, because what are they going to deliver for £84,000 when in actual fact what we've been told in one of the first agendas is that we're not spending enough on assisted learning support. So I don't think that we've actually got enough information in this paper. It doesn't say how much we're spending where and on what, or what we're actually getting for the money that we have committed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen. Do you have a question in that? But I know you're raising some points. We can come back to your recommendations when debate's finished. But do you have a question out of that just now, or do you just wanted to raise those points to sort of tee it up for your recommendations?
Well, what are we getting for £84,000? What are we expecting to achieve for that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. I suppose the premise of the report was really about that we have short-term funding arrangements for a lot of our professional development, and that this was an opportunity, because I think it would be fair to say Dumfries and Galloway Council were quite ahead of the game in terms of needing to invest in our staff, in our learning assistants, in our teachers, in all those that support children with additional support needs. And this is an opportunity that to be able to bring in this sustainable funding, which means that we can commit to this to a longer term. And I'm conscious that earlier there was discussions about recruitment and challenges that we've had. This is an opportunity for us to build some sustainable focus. One of those key posts is around the principal teacher additional support for learning, who has a focus. This is not a new post, this is funding for an existing post that has been short-term funding. So this is about us being able to secure that position. This is the person that works across all of our schools with a team of staff in terms of supporting them around risk assessments, around dysregulated behaviours, that leads in terms of our Team Teach, which is our programme that we use for safe handling, works very closely with colleagues across Scotland in terms of the focus around restraints and seclusion that the Scottish Government have rightly focused on. So this is about sustaining a position that has been key. And I think that from discussions with our union colleagues, discussions at the Joint Safety Committee, has been recognised as a pivotal post to be able to support our schools who are experiencing some significant challenges. One of those is behaviour in schools. So this is that's the key part about that, but I suppose in a sense that reflects the overall position, which is this is about being able to sustain some of the short-term funding arrangements that we have, one of those being learning assistance, be able to put into more formal, surer footing the additional time that they have for training and development during the session, and being able to make those longer-term commitments. I suppose, as I said at the beginning, it really feels like this is the opportunity, this is the funding that we were waiting on for some time to come from Scottish Government to allow us to do what we needed to do. But I think that through the offices of Karen and Framework for Inclusion, we went early because we knew that we needed that was a key pressure.
Thank you, Hugh. Does that answer your question, Councillor Stevenson?
Not really, no. Because we've already had that in post. So what difference has it made to date? Because as councillors, we've never been given that information, you know, yet we're being asked for £84,000 to be committed. And you said there, Hugh, that actually we've already got that post. So how does that tie in with one of the principles, the use of funding, when it's supposed to build on existing funding? If that post was so much needed, why has it not been brought before the committee for us to fund it so that this funding can actually be built on that existing spend for inclusion? That's really the crux of this. Thank you.
Yeah. Hugh, are you able to come back in on that?
I suppose I'd say that my understanding it's an operational matter in terms of the funding, but this was seen as a very clear opportunity. And I would say that we have reported quite regularly, and that individual officer has reported and produced reports to the Joint Safety Committee, which is a member-led committee, a joint union and member-led committee. So I think we have been putting that information into the system, not necessarily reporting here because that we've been asked to report to the Joint Safety Committee. We were due to, and a report was going to the committee that was postponed for tomorrow. So I would say I think that if we've missed the loop, then apologies, but we thought we were reporting to the right forum on that.
Thank you, Chair. And again, and this was the same with the other motion I brought forward to full council, was that sometimes in the Education Committee we get kept out the loop of things, and this is another example where another committee's been making decisions about education and we don't have the oversight for it. You know, we need to be seeing these reports brought back to here as well, because it's us ultimately that are making the decisions in this committee. Thank you.
No, absolutely, and I think that's why, like yourself, raise these issues so that we make sure we're not kept out of the loop. Absolutely. And do you have recommendations that sort of pertaining to that? I can bring, I'll make sure, I'll get everyone's questions first and then bring them back, but just as that. Can I ask a question on that same point though? We're talking about securing that position, that very vital position. Is this funding recurring?
Yes, Chair, it's recurring.
That's great, thank you. Councillor Dashford.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a wee question, 4.15, page 174, goes on about the work to develop a comprehensive strategy for learning centres. How long has that work been going on for, and when can we expect it to be done, roughly? Thanks.
Speaking on behalf of Jonathan, who's led that piece of work, I've seen a draft. The work is ongoing. I would imagine it will be brought back to committee at some point after the summer recess, would be my expectation, though I'm kind of speaking on behalf of John.
Thank you. You satisfied with that? Thank you, Councillor Dashford. Councillor Hill.
Good morning and thank you, Chair. Councillor Stevenson's asked the majority of my questions, but can we just look at page 187? It's really good to see there that in the report that support for learners can undergo this training, but it does say yet again can access 19.5 hours of professional learning, and that's if they want to. I have asked this in committee before. What incentives are we giving to learning support assistants to progress in an actual career and follow-on courses that are specifically in autism or specifically in ADHD, so that the support that we're giving these children is the right support. Because what is the uptake for learning assistants to want to train more if they're just going to get paid the same salary as what they would if they didn't take up the training? I know the Team Teach team struggle to get people to actually engage in the Team Teach training. So what incentives are we putting in for them? Because we used to have classroom assistants and learning support assistants, and there was a difference in the salary, whereas now there isn't. So how are we actually making these jobs a career and getting the correctly qualified and trained staff in to look after these children so they are getting the right support, and we're not employing learning assistants who don't have the qualifications and setting them up to fail, and also setting them up to fail the children that they're supporting, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Jim, do you wish to come in on that?
I do, thank you, Chair, and I'm very grateful for the question, which actually really cuts to the heart of a lot of what we're talking about today. It's absolutely essential that our staff have the relevant training to support children, particularly the young people we're talking about who do have additional needs. And that was one of the key outcomes of the Educational Foundation Trust report that has led a lot of our work. So if you can imagine, you mentioned one thing there, Councillor Hill, which was what incentives are there. I think it's necessary to say that the 19.5 hours are paid. So these are in addition to the hours that are used to support children. So those are hours that are available to all our learning assistants, pro rata, to get paid for professional learning that they do. So that's just the third point. I think the second point is that we are looking to build that into the contract for learning assistants. So your point again is well made. We need to make sure that people who are supporting our young people have got the relevant levels of training. So we've started it simply by putting a budget in place and the commitment that those hours are there. We've added to that by saying there's a very significant professional learning portfolio available to people. And now we're looking at how we can make sure that is built into the contract. I think it's probably worthwhile, Chair, if you're happy for the time, that I pass to Karen to give a bit more detail on what that might look like. Thanks.
No, that would be appreciated. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Councillor. There is a wealth of professional learning, as Jim said, available for our learning assistants. There is a blended approach. There is in-person professional learning opportunities which take place after school, again, because it's a paid opportunity during the in-service days. There is also what we call our anytime, any place professional learning, which is online professional learning, which our learning assistants can access. And through the Framework for Inclusion and the website that's in place, there is a wealth of national professional learning as well, which is related to a whole range of different aspects of additional support. So again, our learning assistants directed both by themselves and by the head teachers in the schools where they are working, they can access a wealth of professional learning that best meets the needs of the learners that they are supporting.
Thank you, Karen. Are you satisfied with that response, Councillor Hill?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, it's really good to see, because I've asked for this over the past 3 years. I've been an elected member, that the training is in place. So it is really good to see. It's just making sure that, I know you say the 19.5 hours is additional pay for people to uptake the training, but 19.5 hours isn't a lot of training. So it's whether we could look at going back to whether we're going to have an increment for people that really excel in this training and really want to, you know, be able to support these young people, because they're constantly going on courses and they're constantly wanting to improve their career. Because it just, with us struggling to get learning supports in, it might just enhance that and attract more people who want a career in it, but don't necessarily want to go to university and become a teacher, but who want to progress their career in learning support and additional support needs. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hill. I believe that Hugh would like to come in to add something extra to that.
Thank you, Chair. And it was just to update Councillor Hill. I think I may have spoken about this before, but there has been a significant piece of work that's ongoing looking at contracts for learning assistants and looking at the different roles that we're asking learning assistants to do across the piece. We have some working in schools, some obviously in our learning centres, and then those learning centres can be the very complex, profound circumstances for children or different types of needs. So there's been quite a widespread consultation with our learning assistants across the region. The 3 generic job descriptions have been drafted with unions. There is now a piece of work to work in terms of with HR and others about how we can actually move those forwards, but that was in part to create some sort of career progression. They haven't been job sized as yet, but that's the process first, is what are the different tasks so we can differentiate roles, so that actually if you're a learning assistant in Langlands, you maybe have a different contract job description than you would if you were working in one of our smaller rural schools.
Thank you, Hugh, for that added information. Much appreciated. I think the Vice Chair would like to come in for a piece.
Yeah, that's really good to hear you. I know the likes of Chrissy Hill and Paula we've talked about, and Willie we've talked about ASN for a long time now, and I think we're moving in the right direction. Particularly relevant for me is your comment on the differentiation of the children and young people that we're working with. It requires totally different skills at different levels, and I think this initiative, I think it will be welcomed by members, but also welcomed by head teachers, that's recognised. And the other thing that comes out of both Audit Scotland and Morgan is that sense of teamwork, and that feeds into what you're talking about, different needs and different situations, and that continuity of support within a school or an early learning centre. So I welcome that progress and look forward to it getting bedded in. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I have Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, I'm just wondering how many permanent additional support for learning staff we currently have. And I think my main question is, where exactly is this funding going to be spent? Councillor Stevenson's already picked up on the £83,000 for that post. But I totally agree with what Councillor Scobie said, especially given Julie's plea earlier about we definitely do need more support for learning staff in the classrooms. And when I was doing my group's budget, I did have a template on additional support for learning, and I was assured by finance at the time that this funding would more than cover my ask. So I removed the template because I took that assurance from them. Note to self, not do that again. But I would just like to know exactly where this funding is going to be spent, because, like Councillor Lowe said, we are being contacted by parents really worried about the allocation, and I say that as a parent and myself, with a wee girl who does need wee blocks of intervention. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'll hand it over with who wants to pick that one up.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give that a go. I suppose that the general details are that this would go to support the ongoing staff development programmes that are in place. That includes the learning assistant, that includes the work that the existing principal teacher is doing. And I suppose just would like to come back to that, because it feels as though that this is not a need. This has been a pressing need. I think that I have reported many times to this committee in terms of the dysregulation, distress behaviours that we're seeing in our settings, and the pressures that is placing on staff, and I know Julia's talked about that as well, so that we have one principal teacher that is managing 16 part-time trainers, is also responding directly to incidents and situations, going to schools, training staff, building capacity, working around supporting best practice, and also at the same time managing changes that are coming out of Scottish Government in terms of seclusion and restraint. So some significant challenges. Other areas is to sustain the work that is set out in the document that was attached to the papers, which is Framework for Inclusion, which talks about the programme of work that's ongoing in terms of supporting staff. Didn't pull that together in terms of the report, because I felt that that was for further work to be done. But if members are requesting that would be work that we would be doing over the summer and would be able to come back. But this is very much, I suppose, for us, is that we have spent a lot of time and responding to questions about learning assistants who are less than half of the total budget of the supports that are available to schools. And I suppose for us, it's about how we can try and ring-fence some capacity to make sure that the promises that we're making about staff development and training capacity, we can sustain that beyond 1 or 2 years, which is what we generally have to do. This is ring-fenced, retained annual revenue, which really gives us a sure footing to be able to offer to our colleagues, those folks that we're trying to recruit into the vacancies, that we struggle to be able to, that we have a programme of continuing professional learning and development that is as good as anywhere. And it feels to me that we haven't probably reported that well enough to this committee in terms of all of that work, and would welcome the opportunity at some point to come back to members to give you more detail on that.
Thank you, Hugh. Is that something you'd be interested in receiving, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, that's definitely something I'd like to receive. I suppose for me, I just like the numbers, like how much are we spending and what are we spending on. If that makes sense. Thank you.
So we're able to produce that for members, because I think they would all appreciate that. So we'll do that as an action going forward. Thank you. Happy with that, Councillor Wilson? Thank you. Who have we got? Julie Irvin.
Thank you, Chair. Some of my questions have been overtaken. What I wanted to ask about is how this additional funding is going to support the stages of intervention, because there was a lot of talk amongst different councillors there about the importance that differentiation of skills and the level of needs are recognised, teamwork, continuity of support. But the stages of intervention is designed to be flexible. And the difficulty we have in schools is it's not as flexible as it needs to be. So learners, I'm reading from page 188 here, and this is straight from stages of intervention. So learners at stages 1 and 2 will be supported within their setting by existing staff. Where are these existing staff? Because most schools that staff have been in touch with me, their staff have been redeployed. So we actually can't meet stages 1 and 2 with additional support staff. Class teachers can meet some of those needs, the majority of them hopefully. Learners at stage 3 will be supported within their setting by existing staff in liaison with other specialist education or partner agency services. So what does that support look like on the ground? What does it look like for me as a class teacher? What does it look like for my colleagues? So you'll be aware that I've been primary 1-2 this year. We've had children come in from nurseries. We've had children who then presented with difficulties. Now they were on the audit. They were at stage 3 on the audit. I then had psychologists, the inclusion team, the behaviour support team, and their granny through my classroom, observing classroom practice, observing the children, giving me feedback. And my feedback was, you're doing everything right. You're doing what you should be doing. Okay? So I'm at the stage where I'm a lone teacher in my class with 3 high tariff children. I'm doing everything I should be, but the behaviour is still not right. It's still not working for me. So this is August. By October, we get the reports and finally get some additional funding for extra staff. In the meantime, my head teacher uses her PEF money, which is what lots of head teachers have had to do. We got the support, and some of the children have moved, and some of the support stopped, quite rightly so, because the children had moved on. But I was still left with some children in my class, and there were other children in the school. So roll forward to this August, still got the same children in the school, but our support hours allocated to the school are half of what they've been in the last year. Now those are one child with quite severe who are needing extra support, but we can't support them all. So the flexibility is you have to weigh up, how do we keep these children present, participating, achieving, and supported in school when we've got less support? And the answer is we can't do it. We can't do it. And that's pretty much most schools across the authority. The gainers this year are the schools with the new learning centres, because that's where our staff have been redeployed to. And I understand the need there is great, but it's not working. So I'm here saying it's not working. How are we supposed to be flexible with the staff allocated to ensure that children can move between those stages in school when we can't actually share the staff out because there's not enough of them? How do we do it? How do we make sure we're meeting these needs and getting it right for every child? Because at this moment in time, I feel I'm failing as a teacher because I can't meet all the needs every day, all the time, on my own. How do we meet those needs?
Thank you for that, Julie. I'll hand that very long, difficult, it's not really a question, it's, again, but I'll hand that over. But it's my understanding that the 1 and 2, the existing staff is the teacher. I think rather than additional support there for the 1 and 2s, it's my understanding that that was teacher. But I'll hand it over to...
1 and 2,
yeah.
To be fair, 1 and 2 I can support in my class, because I have done my Open University dyslexia training, I have done a whole host of training with the authority in the last 30 years. I know I can meet those needs. It's those higher tariff levels 3s and 4s, and then when you have a child who is having issues, say, out with school that's impacting on their learning and behaviour, who needs that little bit of additional support for a short time, they're the ones that it's hardest to support on your own. They're the ones who sometimes need nurture, and you can access nurture, but only if you've got enough children to do so in your setting. So you might not have enough, and parents also have to give permission for that. So there's a couple of issues that compound that.
No, thank you for that, Julie. Fully appreciate and understand that. A lot of what you discussed was very school-specific, but at the same time, it's still, I'll hand over to the officers and see what their views are on some of the issues raised there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Julie. Very clean, compelling picture, and you know, as somebody at the coalface in schools, it's a very important voice. Just to say, you're absolutely right, Chair. The existing staff indicates the teachers in the classrooms, as it does at stage 3 as well. So it's just a new way of describing need. There's nothing new in there effectively. It's just a way of saying, actually, at these levels, this is where the need will be met. It's just making sure that we actually identify that that need does exist. It is in addition to, it's an additional barrier, but we recognise that teachers have always skillfully met the needs of young people who bring additionality in respect of a range of barriers, including trauma. And we are recognising, and it's good that as a nation we are recognising a far greater, wider variety of additional needs than we used to, and I welcome that. But what we are not doing is therefore saying, but every need that we now include in that assessment requires additionality. In truth, most young people who have an additional need, their needs will be and can be met by skillful classroom practitioners in exactly the way Julie's described. I think the point you're making very clearly is that, as we can see from the graph on I've forgotten the page, someone will help me. Thank you. There is simply a very significant increase, and you mentioned it yourself, Julie, that of course, that is where the need has to go, the resource has to go. So if you think what we're doing now is we're trying to balance that in terms of the conversation previously, what about that strategic long-term direction of travel so that we can make sure we are not facing the same thing year on year. That was Councillor Lowe's position, to say how do we build the system. You've heard how we're doing that. But then equally right now we've got the same resource to divide where we've got a tangibly increased need. So we then have to do that. We have to place the resource where the need is greatest. And that's well, and you've testified to that, that's what we've done. But in response to the specifics of the questions, yes, it's stages 1, 2 and 3. The existing staff are the teachers. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that. Hugh, you wish to come in too?
Thank you, Chair. And Julie, I just reiterate Jim's points about we've met and we've talked about the challenges that are in our schools. I suppose I was slightly heartened to when you listed the folks that had been in to try and support, and I think we do have some really good professionals that are able to be available quite quickly and offer advice and guidance. And, you know, we have consultation processes as well. The challenge is that we have a finite amount of resource, and we are stretching that as far as we can to make sure that those with the greatest need actually have that level of support. But, you know, I suppose for me that they are, that learning assistant, that additional adult in the classroom is not the sole response. There is a significant other parts of that jigsaw. If I would hope that they had come back and said, Julie, you're not getting it right, you need this and you need that, I would have anticipated that we would have been able to put some of that support in place for you. The challenge is, as Jim's just said, we have a massive growth in terms of children coming through nursery, and has been reported here previously, significant investment in our nurseries in terms of building the capacity of our staff to be able to support children that are coming in, not where we would have traditionally expected them to be in terms of their development and their social skills, in the hope that we can actually make some of the interventions to address those issues so that they, when they move into school, that they're more able to engage in that alternative or that learning. But it's an ongoing challenge, and fully kind of acknowledge that you and your colleagues are out there, and it's a very difficult environment, and that we are doing our best with the resources that we have, and it's the reality. We're not on the different side on this. We're trying to all find a way to be able to best meet the needs of a growing population of children that have not had the experiences that we would have wanted them to have by the time they come into nursery or school.
Thank you, Hugh, and you wish to come in too, Karen? Okay.
Yes, just to add to that, thank you, Chair. As you'll be aware, I have shared with this committee previously around the work that's been facilitated through some of the strategic equity funding from Scottish Government, and part of that funding has been used to fund nurture teachers, and it was just to say that over this past academic year we have delivered 530 nurture interventions with children and young people in our schools. And because of that early intervention guidance that we work under, we do actually work with pupils at stages 1, 2 and 3 under nurture.
Thank you for that, and thank you all for your input in that. And thank you, Julie, for raising these challenges and struggles, and more importantly, thank you for everything that you're doing for your students. And I know our teachers, the majority of our teachers are exactly the same. It's the pupils, it's the students that are the important ones. And we do need to get it right. And it is a challenge, but it's a challenge on all ends, and we need to be getting it right. Councillor Stitt, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can I ask, if all the £718,000 was spent ASL to include stage 1 and 2s, what would be the consequences for learning centre requests? And on top of that, would this then release the staff needed to support schools like what Julie's just mentioned?
Sorry, Councillor, you're suggesting that we use that £718,000 just to ring fence to recruit learning assistants that would work at stage 1 and 2? Would that be the suggestion?
No, I'm asking, if it was included in stage 1 and 2, what would be the consequences for learning centres if all that budget was taken for the include stage 1 and 2s?
The premise in the paper is that we would use the 718 to fund existing staff development programs that are attached to short-term funding, which would, so that would then free up funding to be able to cover some of the pressures that we're seeing. So that does allow us to be able to meet the needs and the demand for staff to be able to be in place in the learning centres.
Are you content with that response, Councillor Stitt?
I'm happy with that. I just wonder where the interference is coming from.
I think someone had logged in online, and that happens until you can switch your sound off quickly. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I put my name down thinking we were going to be coming to the end of the discussion, but we haven't, and I did put at the very beginning when I spoke that I think we should be, I don't think I would move that we do direct the 718,000 to the additional support that children need, particularly in levels 3 and 4. And this would then hopefully reflect on the valuable and, as Jim says, compelling information that Julie brings to the debate. That would, I hope, then increase the number of ASLs to deal with the 3 and 4, because if we don't, then we are failing. So when you come to the recommendation, Chair, I would want to move that is a recommendation that we do direct it to the 718,000 to ASN, in particular the levels 3 and 4 that cause the greatest problem. And I think in 4.8, it's recognised at the Joint Safety Committee in terms of violence, but you know, it's cause and effect of children, you know, in terms of if they're not getting that support that they need, then it sometimes manifests itself in the behaviour. So, you know, that would, I hope, start to tackle that particular problem, but we do need that increased ASLs to tackle 3 and 4, leaving the 1 and 2s to the generic teachers, as Julie has outlined, that they can cope with, but not in 3 and 4.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. Appreciate that. So the 718k to ASN 3 and 4. Can I ask officers, perhaps the director, I'm not sure, what the knock-on effect, you know, because we have, if we allocate that money, it's just good if we want to agree and recommend something, it's really good to get the whole round picture of whether that would have an effect elsewhere. But thanks.
If I could pass to Hugh on that specific item, because of course we do make environments, as you understand from the previous item, but there will be the totality of the resource is always used with our best intention to our most vulnerable. So Hugh, can you give chapter and verse on this specifically in terms of consequence? It's quite a difficult one to do immediately, but let's see the information that we have to hand, and then we can further, I know that Hugh's going to provide information to the committee on the allocation that was an action from the previous item, and we can then do that, and I see Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose that the consequence is that we simply will have a pressure elsewhere within the system. We are in a place where we are struggling to recruit learning assistants, and part of some of our pressures and vacancies are around we just can't recruit at the moment. And you know, and we hope that the job descriptions and that work will create a more attractive pathway. And we also hope that the opportunity to come into the service with an induction programme, which is really equipping you a learning assistant with much more of the skills needed to work in the particular environment, and also the work that we are the time, the investment that we're putting into our teams and our staff, all of our staff, to be able to change the approach. We know we're in a system, a place now where actually doing the same and continuing to do the same is not going to get us out of where we are. We have to do something very different, and I suppose that the solution I hear a lot is let's just have more learning assistants, but that's not going to change what we need to do, which is how do we fundamentally shift the offer. We are heading towards, you know, I think generally everyone in Scotland has agreed, in 5 years' time it will be 50% or more of our population, of our children and young people in schools will have an additional support need. At that point we have to switch over and say, all of our schools, all of our education settings need to be focused around meeting the needs of children and young people with additional support. Because if you get it right for them, you'll get it right for those other young people that don't. My worry is that if we aren't able to create a sustainable revenue for the building capacity, for training, we continue where we have been for a number of years. It's not an attractive job. There's not a lot of opportunities to develop your skills, but also that we know that we have a massive piece of work to build the capacity of our staff group to adjust and change to the changed circumstances of our children. And it is absolutely, Councillor Scobie, it's like, well, you know, if we do it there, because that's really important, but then we risk not having that, because we can't, sadly, we're not able to do all of it all at the time that we would want to. So the consequences would be that we would then see pressures in terms of our building capacity for staff, our recruitment on that basis would then, I think, take a bit of a hammer, because we are very clear about the offer that we have. This is not just come in and be a learning assistant, it's come in and get opportunities for training and development. But obviously these are decisions that members would want to make. For me, I personally would say, sorry, not personally, but my understanding of the criteria, the principles that are set out in the budget letter is not about spending this on learning assistants. It is very much about building the capacity of all staff to be able to support children with additional support needs. And that, for me, would be through a robust and rigorous training and development programme.
Thank you for that, Hugh. If you're just going to get a small point there, because I'd already said to Councillor Stevenson that I would address with recommendations at the end of it all, and then you got me by stealth there, Willie. So I didn't realise we were coming in with a recommendation. So can we address it at the end, take the information that Hugh has given us and address it at the end? I will come, because I did give Councillor Stevenson the nod there. Are you wishing to come in on that? Or do you want to address recommendations just now? Because I wasn't aware that was... I wouldn't have taken that as a recommendation just yet. It wasn't ahead of you.
No, I'm happy for you to let the debate continue, and then I can come in with my recommendation.
Thank you for that. Who have we got? Is it Councillor? Is it Hill? Councillor Hill? Got Councillor Hill now, please.
Thank you for letting me back in. Just on the points that Julie made, that she had gone back to university and she has done her qualifications and extended her learning. How many of our teachers do that off their own back? And should we be looking to address universities for teacher training courses to incorporate ASN into their courses? Because if it's an issue across the whole of Scotland, then surely new teachers coming through, if they already had that training, that would take pressure off councils, especially ours. And I know we have a great workforce at the moment and a lot of teachers, but we do have a lot of teachers that, particularly in secondary, will learn a subject, say like geography or English, and that's the basis of the degree. And then they have a year's teacher training. But does that incorporate the difficulties that we're now seeing? And we talk about post-COVID, the traumas. So would it be an idea, a suggestion to potentially write to the universities or the Scottish Government? I don't know which angle that would go on, but to ask if these things can be incorporated, and potentially looking at Dumfries and Galloway College and seeing what opportunities they offer for training for these specific needs that we're going to see more and more children come into our education with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I'll let Hugh in on that. But if members were wishing the Education Committee, as part of it, to write to the universities or colleges, I'm happy to do that at the will of the committee. But Hugh?
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Hill, you're absolutely right. And this was one of the recommendations for Angela Morgan's review of additional support. And it does sit currently with Scottish Government and COSLA as the joint implementation meet group, very much a focus on teacher training that has not been probably where we would want it to be, and it needs to change. Morgan was out pre-pandemic just about, so we are waiting, but we know that this is a national activity and a national focus in terms of building the capacity of our teachers, and we await for those details. I suppose it would also be fair to say that we do work quite closely with the college, the local college, in terms of being able to, what their offer is in terms of support and training for our staff as well.
Thanks, Hugh. And Jim, you'd like to come in also?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. I think it's in answer to the direct question, do we know how many teachers have done as Julie has done? No, we don't have that information, so I can answer that directly. I think it is not unreasonable to do as described. However, of course, what we must recognise is that the initial teacher training is only the basis of the career-long journey, and that is the same is true of any job, any profession, where you start off with the minimum plus a bit, and then you have to get into the field and practice and find out what you happen to be good and less good at, and of course is actually dependent on the individual as well and what they bring to the table. So I think there's a reasonable explanation or expectation described through Morgan that there has to be a base level of training through ITT in relation to additional support needs, but we have to recognise actually we here have a lot of agency, and that is described through the 19.5 hours and the work within the framework for inclusion. For example, our inclusive practice PTs, principal teachers, deliver at the Dumfries campus already, so we've got a lot of this going on for our existing staff in the system, but I think it's not a bad thing to do to request a description of what is done through ITT as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So do members think there'll be value in writing that letter?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Then that we shall do. So who do I have now? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting discussion. There's been a lot of focus on ASL pupils, but of course behaviour problems can come from pupils all across the spectrum, not just from very able-bodied pupils, for instance. But my point is, and I'll thank Councillor Stevenson for enabling me to see that the appointment of a principal teacher is in fact an existing position. And I'm a bit concerned we're using that existing funding, because looking at the letter to local authorities, it states the funding should be used to build on existing spend. So it's in addition to an existing spend, and we're not using it that way. We're using it to replace existing spend. And I think that goes against the spirit of this particular funding. And I really hope that it's directed correctly and isn't used elsewhere in the very broad education spend spectrum. Finally, could I ask if the existing principal teacher of supporting learning, what's this person's background? Is it early learning, primary or secondary? So my point is, I think we're going against the spirit of the award of these funding, and that's my main point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Your points are noted, but I think Hugh want to come in the question part of that.
I don't think it would be appropriate to go into the details about, but I would say that I have not met anybody who doesn't have absolute confidence in what we are doing in Dumfries and Galloway around behaviour. Councillor's point about behaviour and additional support for learning. Behaviour is a barrier to learning, so therefore it falls within the descriptions and the criteria of the legislation, and we wouldn't differentiate between, but we have seen behaviour increasingly as a driver in terms of the most complex need. But that can be multifactorial in terms of the circumstances. We know that autism and social communications and neurodivergence, but we also know that experiences out with school and within communities and within families has that impact as well. So we in terms of the general point, you know, that if we don't invest in our folk, how can we expect them to be able to take on these incredible challenges that they have? The last point that Jim was talking about, the General Teaching Council of Scotland has I think 4 years ago, changed the standards for registration to be very much more focused around inclusion. But we have to then give our colleagues in schools, our teachers, the opportunity to develop those skills to be able to deliver on inclusion. And that's the approach that we're taking, and that's where this funding is ultimately about securing a long-term opportunity to make sure that it doesn't disappear again, as it happened at the last service review in 2014, when significant funds were removed and a lot of that training and development disappeared. We know if we don't have colleagues access to training and support professional development, that we will be stuck. And we can't afford to be stuck, because we'll be here every year. Sorry, Councillor Skebby, you won't be. Congratulations, by the way. That we will never break this cycle of just needing more and more. We have to change the whole model, because our children have changed, and they ain't going to change back. We hoped 2-3 years ago across Scotland. I think we generally thought it was a blip. It's not a blip. This is a new state of play for us. And we have to adjust our offer. And that's what this is all about, and that's what this investment's about. And it's great that the Scottish Government have seen that and have created some opportunities for us to use that funding to do that.
Thank you, Hugh. You wishing to come back in, Councillor Young?
Thank you, Chair. My main point hasn't been answered. The Breese and Galloway Education Department is using this money to replace existing funding. The awards letter more or less says the money is to be used to build on. In other words, keep that funding completely, that extra funding completely for enhancing ASL. And we're not doing that. We're using about a fifth of the money to replace funding that we are presently using. We're not building on it. So we're going against the spirit of the award.
Thank you, Councillor Young. I don't agree, but I do take your point that this letter is very clear. But I think, as Hugh set out initially, is that we went early, we made judgments, and that this money is, this is permanent money. This is revenue cash that we can actually secure this process. We were expecting some funding, given the manifesto commitments. We were expecting some funding, and we made allocations on a non-recurring basis to move quickly, as Hugh set out. We moved quickly in the spirit of what we expected to come. We've now been able to, through this funding stream, to secure that. So I reassure you that this is not a replacement of existing revenue spend. This is a process of securing the approach that we have taken, building on the year-on-year funding, which has not allowed us to really stabilise our training offer, and absolutely welcome the security that we can now move from. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian, and thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Wilson.
Could I maybe come in after Councillor Stevenson, please? Thank you.
So you want to come in to add to her recommendations? Absolutely fine. Okay, Councillor Jameson, you wish to come in?
Yes, I think we all realise over the last 3 years this is incredibly complex, and it's incredibly necessary because it affects everybody in the school estate and in the community. Notwithstanding the query over the funding going to the principal teacher, as ever, I'm totally in line with Julie having family members in schools. And we all know there needs to be something done. Jim and I have often this discussion about budgets. In short, I think we need more quality and more differentiation of learning assistants. And also, we've never even talked about the learning assistants, learning and support teachers who are critical, and it's that teamwork element again. So my plea is that we do expand the resources, but that includes numbers as well as quality, and that means training and it means diversification of the learning assistants in alignment with the learning support teachers, so that within that school unit, and that's one thing that we'll touch on later, is that the sort of disaggregation of the professionals into the clusters and into the schools, because the head teachers tend to know what they're dealing with, and that if they've got learning assistants that can do different things at different times, and that feeds back into the qualifications, how they can rise up the professional scale. This money is not a fortune, but it's quite important in addition. So I'm open to suggestions about how we change the recommendations, but I think we all agree that we need the flexibility, we need the teamwork, and we need the appropriate staff in the right place at the right time. And these have been the challenges we've had every year when the allocation process comes out. So it's differentiating between the quality and the quantity of staff, because one thing my own research has done is it totally supports the idea that teachers do need support in a classroom on many occasions, and that actually benefits everybody, whether you're a child with additional support needs, or you're a very academic child, or just a wee Joe and Jill in the middle, that teacher can work with a qualified learning assistant, but the teacher, the head teacher, can identify the people best placed to do that in any particular circumstance. So I welcome the government's guidelines, and I appreciate that we've tried to get ahead of those guidelines, but I think we need to answer the question of members on the appropriateness of the principal teachers, because the ambition is the same, is to improve the outcomes for the children and the staff. So I think that's the one thing we need to clarify, Chair, is the position of the principal teacher. But in general, I think what you try to do is does sit well with the Minister's sort of qualification, how that money is utilised. So, but we've listened to the members, so I'll hand it back over to Tracy.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Jameson, are you asking for something in particular?
I'm open to the consideration of but the thing that I would look back on the Secretary's statements and what this was meant to be, and there's a concern that we're only building on what we're already doing, but that's probably not a bad thing in essence. But I think the particular issue we have is the 83,000 that's going to the principal teacher, and I think that needs bottomed out, and I'm sure that our Labour colleagues have got some comments to make on that. So.
Thank you, but I think as Hugh said earlier, we're not kind of really doing more of the same. That's the whole point. It's about moving on from this and finding the right strategy, the right things that work. It's not just more of the same. So that's what this funding's for and this particular office for. So when you're asking of what this officer's actually their duties are, and that's exactly what it is. It's about moving this on, I believe. Thank you. Let me see. I think we'll come now to Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. In your comments earlier, I think what Councillor Stitt was trying to get at was what is the opportunity cost from Councillor Scobie's suggestion that we spend all 718,000 on stage 1, 2 and 3. I do know, having spoken to many people right across the region, there is that pressure on learning centres, and I would worry if we threw all that money into one particular pot, it would come at the cost of what was needed in these learning centres. And we do have to deal with the violence in school. I do know that the Scottish Government recommendations were met with the gusto of a wet Monday morning because they didn't actually do much other than what we're already doing anyway. So that was extremely unfortunate. But what we are asking to be added to the recommendations is and I think we've all agreed that we don't have enough information here. We don't know where the money is getting spent, we don't know where it would be best to be spent, so it's very difficult for us to make those decisions. And agree to the way that the officers have suggested it is spent. But we would ask that we, in addition to the recommendations, we agree to receive a report to the next meeting of this committee, so not a year down the line, the next one, with a cost breakdown of where the 718,000 will be spent to allow for proper member scrutiny, and agree to receive a biannual report around violence in schools and the impact made by the principal teacher post. And I don't think that's a big ask, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stevenson. I personally don't see that as a big ask neither. I think this information is something that we require as members, especially when we're scrutinising, but also trying to do the best with for our young people in our schools. Do members have it? Councillor Dashford, you have any comments?
Sorry, yeah, can we just get that recommendation in writing for people who were listening? Thanks.
Can you send that to Tracy? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Scobie, you wish back in?
Yeah, I thought you were coming back to me anyway, on the recommendations, because I do feel that we're in a crisis as we speak in 3 and 4 in doing what is needed for those kids that fall into that category. And it is about, the Minister saying the funding should be used to help improve outcomes for all children and young people with ASN. So in that respect, I would want to direct this money. Now, that then would be for officers to determine that may touch on a further report, but I would want to see it directed so that we can specifically deal with the 3 and 4 as Julie outlined. Teachers can generally deal with the 1 and 2s, but there's the difficulties in the 3 and 4, and if this means increasing the number of additional support for learners, then so be it, if that is the way out. But that 714 is used to improve the outcomes of 3 and 4. So I would move that we do direct that 714 or 18 rather to ASN.
Thank you for that. Before I let you in, Councillor Wilson, if you don't mind, would you be content with, we have the recommendations when we see them up, the recommendations from Councillor Stevenson to bring a report back of how this can be spent? Maybe then that would be a time to consider where our allocation changes were, rather than just putting it all into one thing right now, and we do not know the consequences of that, whereas a report coming back could give us the fullest of information, rather than jumping ship and putting it into one thing. Would you be content in waiting until that report came back? Because it may be indeed that actually is where the money would be best spent, but until such times as we find out if indeed that is the fact, then I think I'd be minded to try and direct you, if it's possible, to wait till that report comes back. If members agree with the recommendations, I'm kind of preempting that, sorry everyone. Would you be content with that?
If it's recognised in the recommendation moving forward, that we do look at, directing that to ASN, where, the outcomes would improve on levels 3 and 4.
I would suggest that would probably be work done within that report as well anyway, to see where that would go. But thank you, Councillor Scobie. Councillor Wilson, you wish to come in?
No, it was just to support Councillor Stevenson, and it was probably just what we were saying. Maybe within that report, it'd be asking that, because we do want to direct more support into the classroom. So if that could be part of the report, just pretty much what Councillor Scobie is saying. But obviously, maybe not the whole amount, because obviously we would need to, if that makes sense.
No, that's appreciated, but I think we'll get that report back. If members agree to it, we get that report back, we will hopefully indeed find out exactly the best places to put that to benefit our young people the most. So we have that on the screen just now. All right, I think Councillor Hill wants to come in first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to say, I second Councillor Stevenson on this recommendation. I do think we need to receive a report back. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hill. I think, Hugh, do you wish to come in regarding these recommendations?
Sorry, Chair, I suppose it was just in regard to a report coming back and what we can do in the interim, because if we're making plans, and we have to make plans now for plans to be realised for the start of the academic year. If we're coming back, presumably it would be August or September, we're into the school year, and then if we're making commitments, but then they have to change because colleagues want us to move that funding, I think that would be quite difficult. Just as a point there in terms of how we would manage that process.
Thank you for raising that, Hugh, because it is, we obviously want to meet members' expectations here. I did note that the recommendation was in the past tense, so I wondered whether we were looking to progress with the plans for this year, but to receive a report as to how the money is projected to be spent. Would that allow us to progress? Because I think we all want to meet each other's expectations here. We want to move ahead, but you clearly want clarity as to where this money is going and a more granular breakdown as to what training, what hours, what support, to whom and where, and we can certainly provide that. But I would be keen that we allowed staff to progress with this and not pause the planning until September. Thank you.
No, I understand. I think the next committee wouldn't be enough time to have that money to have been fully spent. So I think it's just in the semantics about time. Not time scale for the report, but the actual information on that first report that you're requiring back, and then a future report to have a breakdown of how it was fully spent. Would you be satisfied with that, Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, I think, we need to look at how much we are spending in the classroom, and I imagine all that 718,000 won't be spent to begin with, so let's have a look at that in September. But it's one of the frustrations of this committee is it sits just as the schools come to an end and just as people are finding this allocation, and it just doesn't give us that time to really scrutinise what's happened from March till now. Thank you.
Yeah, so indeed get a report back with the sort of how it's been allocated to date, and then possibly at that committee we could possibly have a future report to see where the rest, and depending on how we receive that report and our outcomes from that. No, absolutely. You changing some of the wording on that, Tracy? Councillor Stevenson, with the wording up there, we've got agree to receive a report to the next meeting of the committee with a cost breakdown of where 718,000 has been spent to date to allow member scrutiny with potential for a future report on future allocations. Are you content with that? Okay, and this is not final, this is recommendations, Councillor Dashford, in case you're coming in there to say that we've not agreed this. I'm going to take it to members first. Do you wish to be first in, and then Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, I think we've got to be very careful because as we look at the report, both are 2.1 and 2.2 is to note. Now, it's almost being said that monies will have already been spent or will be spent without the decision of this committee. I think we've got to be very careful in terms of tenses and anything else, that it's before members to determine, but it's being suggested now that some of that money will be spent anyway. So is it a member decision or is it an officer decision?
Certainly in your hands here. I mean, the criteria for the spend is broad. We clearly want to, we did wait for a wee while until we got the allocation, and we do want to move ahead to use this money, and I know members don't want to create any delay in the spend for the pupils in the here and now, but I do acknowledge that if we are asking for your approval today to move ahead on the spend as set out in 4.7 and 4.12, but to bring further details back as to exactly what that looks like. Would that be acceptable?
Thank you, Gillian. By doing that, Councillor Scobie, we can progress with this, but we can put a halt on this if we get that report back and change direction. I think that's basically the principle here. We don't want to stop things, we don't want to stop allocations right now, but if we keep that going as is in the first point 1 and 2 in the report, and then we bring a report back, and then we may find that indeed your recommendation may be the one that is preferred, but whatever. Well, perhaps you will see other information in that report that that influences how you feel about this item as well. Councillor Dashford, do you want to come in? Thank you. So we have these, we'll go to recommendations now, but we have these added recommendations. Do members have any objections to these recommendations? Do we have anyone otherwise minded? Noting that Councillor Scobie did have a different recommendation and has conceded that following this report, then his other further recommendation could be considered depending on the results of the report. Does anyone else have anything? No? So right, we will go to the recommendations. 1, note the agreed funding principles as set out by the Scottish Government and as outlined in this report. Note the proposed spending plan for the local allocation as set out in paragraphs 4.7 and 4.12. Agree to receive a report at the next meeting of the committee with a cost breakdown of where 718,000 has been spent to date to allow member scrutiny with potential for a further report on future allocations, and agree to receive a biannual report around violence in schools and the impact made by the principal teacher post. And as an action going forward, there is a letter to be written to, is it local universities and college? Is that what we're looking to write something to find out what training? Or is it?
If I may, Chair, it could be to the Deans of Education who represent all university provision across ITE in Scotland. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you for that clarity. Gillian? Right, we will move to agenda item 10, autism provision, report by Education Director, Education Skills. We've got Lauren Foss is here to assist if members have any questions. Lauren, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing to add, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'll open to member debate. Any questions? Councillor Stead.
Thanks, Chair. I welcome this report, but I know when we're talking about option 2 and we're looking at Sunrar, I know this is welcome, but this could be a long time if it had got to be standalone. Have we any idea at present how long this would take? I know it's like a piece of string line, but I know we've got the wee hubs in different schools, but to have 1 hour in the West, I think it's essential this has got to be as quick as anything.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Stitt. I think what I would suggest is, whilst I haven't detailed the names of any locations within Stranraer, it would be fair to say that we have a location identified that's an existing facility that wouldn't take a huge amount of change to make it appropriate to operate as a standalone facility. So it wouldn't be the same timescale as a new build coming completely out of the ground with an idea, with a brownfield site needing identified. So it could be relatively quick.
That's fine, thanks.
Julie. Julie Irving.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question about an item on page 192. So up at 4.2, it talks about stages 3 and 4 are able to be supported at times within mainstream, however also require support elsewhere within the school, generally within the existing learning centre provision. So we have many children who attend local schools because they want to be very much part of their community. They're level 3, level 4, but not every school has learning centre provision. So I'm wondering what that support from elsewhere is and how staff support those learners.
Thank you, Julie. Lauren, do you have a response to that?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Julie. I think in reference to the subject matter, the stage 4 and stage 3 numbers are against children identified with autism specifically. And the numbers in the table 1, are specifically across the secondary provision, not primary. Primary is separate to this. Now, where they exist within a secondary provision, they are supported through that mainstream allocation, I guess, within that setting. What we're looking to do here is really just enhance the environment to make that a more appropriate learning space for the stage 3 and 4 children to, I'm going to use a phrase called to dip in and out of that mainstream provision, where they may be comfortable inside a science lesson, for example, but it may be a point where that's too overwhelming and they need to retreat from that area and go to a space within the school where their needs can be better met, whatever that need happened to be. There is a range beyond stage 4, and that's the sort of day placement references throughout the document. They are few and far between, but what we're trying to do is to provide a much more suitable environment to support our stage 4, stage 3 within the mainstream settings, within the local communities as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Are you okay with that, Julie?
Yeah, so this is specifically secondary pupils. Yep, thank you. It's just I was aware that although some secondary schools have developed learning centres, they're not recognised learning centres. So from that point of view, to get investment and funding and support for them will be phenomenal, and the staff on the ground will be ecstatic about that.
Thank you for that, Julie. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report. Very interesting reading. I'm pleased so much consideration has been given to the learning space. I mean, if you go into one of our modern secondary schools, the one I'm most familiar with is Dalbeattie High School, it's actually, for a youngster with perhaps some levels of autism, it's a terrifying experience. It's brightly lit, it's all hard spaces, it's all noise, it's all bizz. And I'm pleased that so much attention has been given to local environment improvement, it's called, in various schools throughout the region. And I would ask that, yes, soft, safe areas are made for children to have time away from the buzz of normal school life and can experience in a sort of quiet, soundproofed environment. It used to be that libraries provided this type of environment to a certain extent, but libraries, in my experience, are now very busy places, and quite rightly so. An awful lot goes on in there. So it's just a comment, really. I'm just delighted that so much consideration has been given to, for instance, in page 192, all the bullet points there. So thank you very much for that. It's just a comment.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Who have we got? I just put my glasses on. Councillor Brodie.
Thanks, Chair. I also welcome this report. It's good that we've got option 2 before us because the potential to give our pupils with ASD the best support in the local community, which is really important. I'd just like some assurance on that the provision across the region will be a uniform and good provision for all these children, that there won't be a two-tier system where there's better facilities in Dumfries and Stranraer. And just like to pick up on the Stranraer's point about the Stranraer one, unlike the other schools in the region, Stranraer, they're going to have a standalone option. Have we not looked at providing the same, providing a facility within Stranraer Academy, which would make it easier to integrate people with autism across them? So assurance please on the uniformity of that, and whether we've looked at the Stranraer campus to see if they could also be integrated into the school system, and which would also take a shorter time to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Lauren, do you have a response for that question?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Brodie. I certainly absolutely look to have equity and fairness of provision across the authority. I think the one thing that we do all have to recognise is that our secondary schools are all different. They're all of a different age and construction method, but what we've looked to do is to apply the specification within this report across an area within the secondary schools and try and match that up as best as we possibly can. So there will be consistency of approach, there will be consistency of finish around the things that Councillor Young, you've mentioned as well, around the textures, the colours, the sensory elements that are really the key triggers and things that we need to adjust that aren't really in place just now in a lot of instances. So we will look to do that as best as we can. I alluded to a solution in Stranraer and a location being identified. I'll not give too much away, but if you look exactly between Stranraer Academy and Riffard Primary School, there's a council-owned facility which is walking distance from one and the other, which actually provides the perfect location to not only work independently as a separate building that you can get to on its own right, but can support the academy and actually also can support Riffard Primary School. One of the things that we haven't touched on, and it is referenced in the report, is that transition period for P6, 7 pupils upwards into secondary and how autism and I guess the changing environment can support that is built into this as well. So there is that extra strength around the Stranraer solution. What it does give us is that flexibility if any child is beyond stage 4, that day placement provision doesn't exist in that area of the authority. So it gives us true flexibility for the solution that we're looking for. Still a bit of work to do on that, but I think it will be a really good solution for the Stranraer area.
Thank you, Lauren. Are you content with that response, Councillor Brodie?
Yeah, the second part of my question was, have you looked at incorporating it within the Stranraer Academy campus to make it similar to other ones? Perhaps we'll also be having a discussion further on this one when you bring more details forward.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brodie. Councillor Lowe, you wish to speak now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very much welcome Councillor Young's comments. Diabetes is a very new school. The library is actually just a big airy room that overlooks the lunch hall, and it is quite difficult already for some of our pupils to cope there. Considerations are the older schools, say like Castle Douglas and Kirkcudbright, that already have huge maintenance problems. Are they going to cost any more to adapt? And in redesigning any brand new builds that maybe we haven't started, will this then be considered as part of the basic design, that there are spaces put into that design? And I'm also wondering if in certain circumstances now we're beginning to have schools which are mothballed or empty, maybe nearby our towns, whether they become any centres in the future for autism support.
Thank you through yourself, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lowe. Our old schools absolutely do have maintenance and repairs headaches that are significant in some instances. I think what we've done when reviewing the floor plans for all of the schools is we've identified the location within that setting that the autism provision would be located. The square meterage for those areas is slightly different from school to school. We've reviewed the condition information. We've worked with colleagues in property to establish a fair and reasonable cost per metre square to make those adjustments. So I'm quite confident in the values that we have against those settings, and we've applied that fairly consistently across the piece. And also, actually, I should add that we've built in a contingency level over and above the actual cost that we'd see. So we've got that bit of flexibility to ebb and flow that value of investment as we see fit. The view on our new facilities, so we've got a couple of projects on the go. Dumfries High School is in a contract position where we've already agreed what we're getting there. I would say, though, that some of the principles of creating an environment that provides that neurodiversity and stops the sensory overload is something that's captured through all design and has been for a number of years now. So it certainly will reflect that, and the RBL, removing barriers to learning setting within the high school, is not too far away from some of the modelling we've done specifically for autism, albeit it's more of a wider learning centre environment. And we have the opportunity to take all of the learning that we're going to gain through this process for the Academy project. That's another significant capital investment coming forward. And actually what we'll do off the back of all of this work is create a suite of post-occupancy evaluations that will feed into all asset class investment moving into the future. So hopefully that provides an answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Are you content with that response, Councillor Lowe?
Yeah, I was just also the consideration that for those with an extreme need, whether any of our small empty rural schools that are fairly near a town could potentially be considered in the future as bases for both primary and secondary support.
Apologies, sorry for missing that part out. Absolutely, they are assets that the council have ownership on, and if there was a need, whatever that happened to be, whether it was for this or anything else, they're facilities that we could look to utilise. However, I think you know, we have an annual report that comes to committee that talks about the utilisation of our school estate. We're in fortunate position, I guess, from a utilisation perspective, that we have space within our schools, and that's where the need is, that's where the children are. If we're looking to support our stage 3 and 4 children, they are still within mainstream settings the majority of the time, and that's really where we should try and do it. If the demand changed and it was more of a day placement extraction from mainstream, then absolutely that's something that we could consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Councillor Scobie?
Thanks, Chair. I can't think where Lauren's talking about when he gave us those directions between Stranraer Academy and Rafad. However, I'm sure it will be welcome as a standalone facility. But my understanding, rightly or wrongly, was that this also could facilitate primary children, and indeed there may be one being considered. It's the criteria, if that is the case, in terms of how, you know, who would qualify, maybe the wrong word, but who would be advantaged if that facility was available, and would that be available to primary as well as secondary pupils? Because of the 262 you refer to, and they're not all in Stranraer, so they're no, then there are primaries as well, and it's how do we facilitate those. Of that 260, it's an interesting figure because I've been asking Jim in terms of NDAS, and indeed it was an action, and Jim has tried his best to try and get figures in terms of how many have actually had an NDAS assessment. And I've put that now for the Chief Executive to intervene to find out, given that we're about sharing information between the Council and NHS. So it'd be interesting just to get that figure of the 262 and indeed more have had an end assessment. But it's really around, is it just for secondary or will it facilitate primary as well? Because we've got primary kids who do require that level of support and who just cannot cope in primary schools.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Scobie. This is absolutely really targeting secondary provision. We do appreciate that there will be a level of P6-7 transition work where these facilities will be able to support smaller numbers of primary provision, but it's not looking to support. If you look at the on 4.1, the detail, we've got 987 across autistic young people identified across the authority, of which half are around secondary. That's where the focus has been. Then narrowing that further, it's the stage 3 and 4, because stage 1 and 2 predominantly will still be within the mainstream class environment. So accept that this wasn't looking to provide environmental changes for primary provision, but what we can certainly do is use the learning from this for when any enhancement on investment goes into the primary estate. You'll be very aware that the primary estate is much bigger. We've got 98 primary schools across the state. It's much harder to make those changes at a global level. I think as well, it's a slightly different environment in that secondary schools, subjects changing, moving around the school, etc. That it's maybe easier to address some of this through some quick, easier changes to primary schools, but it's certainly something that hasn't been built into this as a project, unfortunately.
Thank you, Lauren. Councillor Hill?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, I've spoken to the Director about this previously, and with you saying, Lan, that some of these children are past stage 4 and potentially need medical intervention as well, and we're working collaboratively with NHS colleagues. Have we got assurance that NHS colleagues are going to be available or putting staff in to address the medical needs of these young people, so that it's not just falling on education and the council, please? Because I know it's been an issue in the past. Thank you.
Councillor Hill, I know that this is a capital report, but you and I have discussed this in terms of healthcare in schools in the past, and Hugh, you kindly come back to the table here, and I know this is a piece of ongoing work with the healthcare in schools policy. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Hill, it's a good point, well made. I think the cohort of children that you're talking about is a very small number of children with profound autism, which includes complex disabilities, often learning and physical. And I think that the model that Lauren is talking about not necessarily going to be able to accommodate those children because of the level of, as Councillor Hill says, the level of healthcare and education provision. So we will continue to work with our colleagues in the NHS and in social work in terms of how we meet those children and young people's needs. But it is absolutely a complex and multi-service response that's needed.
Thank you, Hugh, and thank you, Councillor Hill, for that question. Right. No other questions. I'll just move to recommendations. So members are asked to, 1, note the content of the report and the detail captured in sections 4.5 and 4.6 around options 1 and 2. Agree with officer's recommendation as detailed in section 4.9 with option 2. Represents the most advantageous option for our autistic young people. And 3, agree that officers take a report to Economy and Infrastructure Committee requesting that the capital allocation is via to the school's asset class as detailed in section 4.10.1. So I think lunch is here, so if we take a break for lunch, what time are we talking? So that's 3 minutes past 1, so we say come back at 1:30? Thank you. Welcome back, members, to, I was going to say the committee, but I keep forgetting the name of it. Anyway, education, skills and community wellbeing. There you go. We're on to agenda item 11, the review of supporting learners' management structures. We've got Hugh again here to assist us. If we have any questions, Hugh, do you have anything to add to the report?
No, nothing, Chair. Thank you.
So do members have any questions? I'm not seeing anything in the room or seeing anything online, so just go to recommendations. Well, members are asked to agree the scope for the review of supporting learners' management arrangements and the timetable for delivery as set out in Appendix 4 and referenced in paragraphs 4.11 and 4.12. Oh, sorry, Julie, I didn't see there. Do you wishing to come in here before? Right, no worries.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. The first one is on page 223. So it's looking at the strategic outcome 17, and it talks about deliver a virtual learning campus to provide more equitable access to subjects and learning opportunities for young people. So my question is, since online teaching and learning is not part of nationally recognised SNCT teachers' contracts, and as such no teacher can be compelled to work online at the moment, how will this virtual learning campus be developed? We do have a local agreement specifically for DG Connects, but if this is being further developed, negotiations would be more appropriate at national level. So it was just to question that. My next question, sorry, I've got.
Would you like me to respond to that question, Julie?
Do you want to do one at a time? Thank you.
I think given that this is currently in the midst of LNCT and SNCT negotiations, your question regarding whether this should be a national agreement, I'll leave that for you to take through your negotiating machinery. I'm delighted that Dumfries and Galloway has achieved a local agreement in terms of online learning and teaching. There's clearly a lot to work through in terms of providing a digital offer for our young people, but it just provides one tool in the armoury, and today members are being asked to agree the scope of the review, and only the scope, not the individual ramifications of the actions within it. But thank you.
Thank you. My next question is to do with page 227, and it's health and safety. We've got figures for some of the health and safety things, but number of reported near misses, it just says data only. Number of employee reported accidents, data only. Number of reported violent incidents to employees, data only. What, do we not have actual figures for those at the 6-monthly review?
Sorry, Julie, this is the service route. You're looking at the data from the performance report, and I do understand that this is data that we're bringing here for members' awareness, but today we're really being asked to review the scope of the supporting learners service. So we're not really looking at the scrutiny of the performance of health and safety at this point, but I do take your point that it's data that we're presenting in to provide context for the review of supporting learners. Thank you.
But there's no data there, that's what I'm asking.
It's the school's plan, that's why there's no data in it. This is the forward plan for 25-26.
But there's data above.
Perhaps we can, at the next performance report, the performance report will be picked up in September. And of course, so as the performance 6-monthly report on the service plan will be picked up in September, and it's at that point we could look at the performance data for the directorate. Today we're being asked to review the scope of this review of supporting learners' management structure following members' decision on the budget back in February. Thank you.
Okay.
To come in.
Sorry, can I just clarify and apologise to Julian and to members that we included it to give confidence that the scope and the review of supporting learners management is in the actual plan for the coming year, this year. So that was the purpose of it. My understanding is it has already been agreed by committee. This was just to give reference and reassurance that this scope had already been, effectively the plan had already been agreed by elected members.
So it's not the data we're scrutinising, so there is no requirement for real data. Yeah, absolutely, I get that.
Okay. The next question was to do with the schools risk register on page 228. So there was a concern about a failure to reduce the gap in attainment for the most vulnerable pupils, and within that it talks about failure to identify most vulnerable pupils, failure to provide curriculum offer to meet needs of pupils, an increase in inequalities. And I know the mitigation contingency that's in there, we've, you know, the learning and teaching pedagogy reflecting the needs of learners, absolutely. But my concern is, are we actually doing enough there? And if you look further down on page 229, it talks about allocation of resource, including deployment of staff in settings. The risk factors there, I think there's a risk factor missing because staff morale at the moment is not feeling valued. I've been contacted by a few people just this morning actually, raising concerns. And the other difficulty we have, yes, we've got recruitment issues, but once again, we've overbidded for probationer teachers, which has blocked jobs for those who were on temporary contracts but due permanency. So there haven't been jobs for everybody to transfer into, not full-time jobs, because probationers have taken those. So there's real concerns about staff morale within that and the allocation of resources and how they are deployed. So my question is, how are we going to address that?
Thank you, Julie. Jim, you'd like to come in on that?
I suppose I would just, my point remains that what we're looking at today is to agree the scope of support and learners review, and not necessarily to respond to questions on the service plan. However, you know, your questions are, you know, they raise debate, but really what we're being asked to do today is agree Appendix 4. And I think in fairness, officers brought forward the service plan, as Hugh identified, in order to show that it was part of our planned work, not necessarily in terms of scrutiny of the performance review. But Jim, do you want to come in to reassure our teacher representative? Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Merely to say thank you, Julie. I appreciate the comments you make, and it's in no way saying those aren't relevant and very useful comments. It's merely to say the particular point of this item was to consider the scope of the review of the management structure alone of supporting learners. And as you said, this school service plan, this has already been agreed by elected members. And so the next point will be the review of this plan when we have had some of the year pass by and we can give a 6-monthly indication of how well we've stuck to it. I absolutely take the points you're making, however, but this plan is now, it's a matter of fact and a matter of an agreement from this committee. So in terms of the actual scope of the piece of work, that's what we're trying to establish today, whether elected members are happy with the scope of the management structure of supporting learners. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Julie, for your comments.
Can I come back in, please? Because in Appendix 4, it says areas to be investigated, funding and resource allocation, staffing and workforce development. So that speaks directly to the questions I was asking, because staffing and workforce development, if you're taking too many probationers and there's no jobs for them next year, like there hasn't been for the last 5-6 years, then you're not really developing your staffing and developing your workforce.
Points are noted. It wasn't a question.
I suppose I can respond to say that that's why it will be investigated as part of the learning review. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm aware this was brought as part of that motion to full council at budget time. But I suppose my ask is, how will this be different to what we're doing now, and how will it be better? In And is this what the administration was expecting, and will there definitely be a reduction in management posts per full-time equivalent? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Jim?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Stevenson. The last bit first, yes, this will result in a reduction of management time, and the reason for the paper is because of that, that saving having been taken. It then required that we do an operational rejigging of how that service would be managed. So it's specifically, it's not on the service, a review of the service in totality. It's merely to say, having removed that manager's post, how will that service now be managed? So that's literally the scope of what we're putting down on paper here. Thanks, Councillor.
Thanks, Jim. Are you content with that, Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, I had asked how, will this make the service better? And is this what the expectations of the administration are, considering it was what you had popped in the budget motion? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, and it's absolutely spot on. You may also remember that we didn't take a reduction in assisted learning support teachers, which was to be devolved out to the schools. The principle of that motion was to, as it states in here, is that the staff should be where the need is, and if we can reduce management staff and employ them in the clusters and the schools, then hopefully we'll see a benefit in terms of the knowledge being in the schools, which can be best applied within the schools in that area. That's the principle behind the motion, and this is just the Directorate looking to implement those wishes. So there's a disaggregation of staff out to the schools so that the clusters and the individual schools have a little bit more autonomy over how they're utilised, etc., etc. But it's a big piece of work, and every subject we've talked about today is reliant on resources. It's how best we use the resources and where we put these resources. So I think that's the crux of the ambition of this motion. And I think the paper that's put before us is a first step towards the implementation of that. And the proof will be in the pudding. And Julie's made excellent representation on behalf of the staff and how they want to do the best job they can for the children. So this is one step towards that, I would suggest, but it'll be open to scrutiny as an ongoing basis, and I know that the officers are keen to actually respond to our feeling that we need the staff in the schools who are in direct contact with the teachers and the children.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jameson, Vice Chair. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a quick question on page 222? The percentage of P1, P4, P7 children combined achieving CFE level relevant to their stage in literacy for looked after children, and the one below for numeracy, we're at 35% and 47%. Are they, because it says targets at the top of the column, so are they targets or actual figures? Just because they're extremely low for targets, if they are targets, just for clarification, please.
Sorry, Councillor Hill, I think I didn't mean to cut across our trade union colleague, but I am trying to keep the discussion to Appendix 4. So I know that this report, in terms of the appendix of the service plan, has already been agreed by members, and I didn't want to extend the debate beyond that. But if there is any particular comment that people want to make, or we will bring that review back as we consider the 6-month performance report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gillian. So, do we have any more questions? Nothing from the floor, nothing online. Okay, we'll go to recommendations. So, as I went too fast earlier on, the recommendations are members are asked to agree the scope for the review of supporting learners management arrangements and the timetable for delivery. Agenda item number 12, strengthening resilience, report by Executive Director, Education Skills and Community Wellbeing. We have Martin Ogilvie here to assist if members have any questions. Martin, do you have anything to add to the report?
Nothing, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'll open up to member debate. Do we have any questions or comments? No questions for you today, Martin. Right, I'm not going to read all those recommendations. I will do note 1 to 7. Oh, sorry. Councillor David Ingalls.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry to come in a bit late there. Just a quick question. I wonder how close we are with local resilience groups. I know from experience over here in the Western Newtonstone area, the resilience group were a wee bit detached from the council. I'm wondering whether, you know, there is an ongoing piece of work to try and build that relationship again with resilience groups. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Martin, you wish to come in on that?
Yeah, I'll come back in. We first established community resilience groups back in the winter of 2010, and sort of during COVID they came into their own and stepped up and did far more than we ever envisaged they would do at the start. We've currently got about 80 established groups. They are independent and autonomous. They're not taskable by the council, but they are insured by the council. So in the report, there's some detail of the 3 different types of community resilience groups that we have in terms of their independence or their affiliated relationship to the community council. And depending on that relationship depends on how we insure them, but they're all insured for the same activities. So we do give them a lot of support. We do run workshops and training for them. There's a number of support packages available for free on the council's webpage. So they are independent and autonomous, not taskable, but there is a relationship between us and the established groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Ingalls?
To a certain degree, Chair. I just feel that sometimes we need to be a little more proactive with the volunteers who are on these resilience groups. Again, from experience over here, it would be useful to have that direct contact through community council to the resilience group, offering the services that we can offer them and the support we can offer them and the guidance to help them keep the resilience groups together and build their resilience groups. But I take Martin's point. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor Ingalls, and that's noted. So we'll go to recommendations. Again, I'm not reading all that recommendations. We'll note 1 to 7, agree 8 and 9, note 10, agree 11, 12 and 13. Members content with that? Thank you. So, agenda item number 13, the usual place update. So we have Lynn Burgess, online, on Teams to assist. Do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing to add.
Okay, I'll open it up to members, questions or comments. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to lie, I'm quite disappointed with this report, having moved this motion back in February, asking for an urgent report on what support could be provided to ensure the long-term future of the usual place, which, as we all know, provides a vital service. I know from having met with Craig from the usual place as recently as yesterday that they absolutely appreciate the support they've received from the council, but with the financial difficulties they're still facing, the trustees will be making a decision regarding their future this side of Christmas and whether they will be able to remain open. And I'm just wondering what additional support can be given to them, which is really what I asked for to be brought back. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. Do you have a response to that question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say there's a multi-agency group working with the usual place just now to look at their long-term sustainability. So short-term funding has been put in place and plans are still ongoing to support the long-term sustainable nature of the usual place. There's a deficit in this financial year which they're striving to overcome first of all, but the real thrust of the work is being led by SOCI and Inspiring Scotland in the interest of trying to streamline the number of people who are working with Craig and his team at the usual place. So there is a partnership effort going in to support them, but it's been streamlined through 2 points of contact just to reduce the burden on the usual place team.
Thank you for that. Are you content that there is work? It sounds like there's conjoined work with several different partnerships to try and help usual place. We all know it's vital, not just in Dumfries, but right across the region, what they provide. So are you happy that at least there appears to be work being ongoing?
Yeah, happy that there's work ongoing. Just wondering, is somebody keeping a check on that, especially conscious we're going into recess? And thank you.
So yeah, Lynn, about checking in with the usual place and ongoing throughout recess, will that be constant? Will that be continuing?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It will be. There's a single point of contact within the council. So, and I sit on the partnership group which is led by Scottish Government and other colleagues, and we have an operational member of the employability team who's in regular contact with the usual place team.
Thank you for that. You happy, Councillor Wilson? Do we have any other questions? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm very pleased that the usual place are getting help to increase their sustainability. I am, however, aware that even in my own ward, there are excellent third sector organisations who are struggling equally with particularly the increase in the employees' national insurance contributions. And I would hope that they would receive some other help, but I know it's not going to happen, sadly. But I would ask that with the usual place, we are able to find a solution that allows the council to gradually withdraw, and hopefully the usual place will become self-sufficient, perhaps by diversifying and looking for other income streams. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Do you have anything to add to that, Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's probably worth mentioning that the support that's available to the usual place would be available to other TSOs, particularly in relation to, for example, if they deliver employability services, accessing our light touch flexible framework. We are looking at doing things in a sustainable way rather than short-term funding. So it's about services and being paid for the services that are being provided rather than short-term grants. So we're looking at long-term approaches, and the same approach would be taken to any TSO or third sector community group that got in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. You happy with that, Councillor Young?
I'm very happy with that. Happy to hear that. Thank you.
Yes, it's very important in these situations and all situations that we can't be doing this sticking plaster. We have to address the whole health of an organisation. So, but thank you. Councillor McGregor?
Thanks very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I just want to completely agree with Councillor Wilson's comments and reinforce them. I don't think we should be naive. The usual place will never be self-sustaining because of the nature of the service that it delivers, but the value that it delivers to its users cannot be underestimated. So I'm with Caroline on this, that I want to see them as supported as we can. I take comfort from the words that Lynn's given around assurance of long-term funding, which is good. But as I say, I don't think we can underestimate the value that this organisation does. I'd just like to be assured that we are going to continue to do all we can to support them in any way that we can, because their work is absolutely invaluable.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. I think we all agree with that in here, and I think Lynn's given us some assurance that there is ongoing work, not just by ourselves, but other organisations working in partnership, and that will be ongoing. And we're always concerned about recess and what things, how it was in recess. But Lynn has said that is ongoing, and there's constant contact. And they have a one-person contact so that they're able to reach out to us as well. Is that right, Lynn?
Yeah, they have a named contact within the Employability and Skills Service that they work closely with. And just to reassure Councillor McGregor, there's work being progressed, supported by one of the other partners, to quantify the impact that the usual place has, which will help them in their ongoing future funding bids. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you for that, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Walters.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to get some clarification on a couple of the points on page 262, the 4.6. Just for my own thing. The second point down is employability provision is commissioned through a light touch flexible framework. I wonder if the officer could just clarify what's actually meant by that, because that's not a phrase I've come across before. And then the fourth point down, where it says about the annual income of 30,000, is that actually new income then that the usual place are going to be able to generate from charges to the education department? That's the two questions I've got.
Thank you for that. You want to come in on that, Lynn?
Yeah, I'll try to answer the light touch flexible framework, but it's a procurement issue, so I may well get it wrong. But my understanding on certainly how it's operating for us is that it's a way of procuring which is easier on the organisation. So the organisation do the work in advance to join our flexible framework, and then we put out commissions through the flexible framework to those organisations that are on the flexible framework, and it makes it easier for them in that they don't have to provide all of that information every time. It's divided up into lots, so they state which lots they would be prepared to bid, and it means that they just have to prepare just the bid documentation, not all the other documentation that goes aside it. I've probably completely ignored the procurement guidance on that, so I'm happy to come back with more information if it would be helpful, Councillor. The other point on the education funding, that was part of a previous agreement which we'd talked about. There was a roundtable previously to support the usual place, and there was an action for them to develop a charging framework, and they have done that, and it means that education have been able to fund students that attend the usual place and forecast that as an ongoing funding stream. So yes, they should be able to generate that revenue on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lynn. Are you content with that, Councillor Walters?
Yes, thanks very much. Especially the first bit, I had no idea it was to do with procurement. So it might be perhaps useful if I could get a definition of that circulated around after the meeting, as Lynn suggested. That'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Walters. Indeed, if that could be circulated to all members, that would be much appreciated. Councillor Dempster.
Afternoon, Chair. Just an observation again. It's on page 262 and 263, 4.8, and it's the last couple of lines on page 263, where the document talks about the usual place implementing actions to help expand and diversify its income streams, submit stronger applications. And if you look at organisations like Dagcast and Fleece and Galloway Citizens Vice Service, they employ a full-time member of staff whose only role is to look for external funding. And we often experience, certainly in this area committee, we'll get discretionary grant applications that if some aren't just crossing the right I's and crossing the right T's, that they seem to fall. And there is an issue about how we support organisations to submit strong funding applications, and I'm sure third sector, D&G and others will be supporting them. But it's a worry that it appears in the document that it seems that they don't have the capacity to submit strong applications for what is a fabulous service, a fabulous organisation. And I'd endorse what Caroline and Gail said earlier. It's something we can't afford to lose. And if their weakness is simply funding applications, we collectively should be doing something to strengthen that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster. Sutherland, do we assist not just the usual place but other organisations that do struggle? We find that with a lot of applications. You do have people who are professional filler-outers, but you've got other ones that really struggle. So do we, are we in this situation offering strong support to help them with these applications?
So in this instance, the usual place tend to get their support from Inspiring Scotland, who have been a long-term supporter of the organisation, and there's no intent to suggest that they're not submitting strong applications. They are, in fact, submitting strong applications. In general terms, third sector D&G would provide support, and we would signpost people to third sector D&G, particularly in terms of, and I can't speak for the whole council, but certainly for employability, we have to be careful we're not sitting on both sides of the fence, because it's an open and fair procurement process. So we're writing the tenders. We wouldn't provide the support directly because that would be a conflict. But we do signpost. Thank you.
Yes, so we don't provide personally the support, but we do signpost to the correct places, and we would do that for all organisations because, as you said, it's a fair process. But thank you. Are you content with that, Councillor Dempster?
Absolutely, Chair. I just find it contradictory that we're saying that they need to submit stronger applications when in fact we're hearing that they do submit strong applications. So as long as they're getting support from somewhere, and I knew third sector D&G would be involved, I just worry that some organisations employ professionals, they get very, very colourful and well presented applications, and others are not just quite have the same detail, simply because the folk that fill in the forms are not necessarily professionals. But no, I made a point, and I'm happy with the response. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster. Do we have any other questions? No, then I'll move to recommendations. Members are asked to note the update provided, and we had an additional verbal update from Lynn also, and the actions taken to date as outlined in paragraphs 4.5 to 4.8. Thank you, Lynn. Item number 14, statutory consultation, Carsfairn Primary School and Nursery. We have Louise Ray here to assist if members have any questions. Do you have anything to add to the report, Louise?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So do members have any questions on this item? No. No, nothing in the room and nothing online. So I'll try not to jump too quickly to recommendations in case there's anyone I have missed. No? Okay, we'll go to recommendations. Members are asked to 1. Note the request received from Carsfairn Community Council. 2. Note the statutory guidance on repeating school closures. Note the community engagement undertaken and agree to the commencement of the statutory consultation process for the closure of Carsfairn Primary School and Nursery. Thank you, members. Item 5, statutory consultation Polnaki Primary School. And we have Kevin Williamson here to assist. Do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add.
Thank you. So we'll go to member questions. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite an interesting school closure. The parents are aware that the school is no longer viable because of the decrease in pupil numbers. I think it was down to 4 or 5 youngsters. And they were very happy that for the remainder of the term's now ended, for the remainder of the term, which has just ended, the region provided transport to Auchinleck Primary School, and that was very well received. However, Auchinleck Primary School is not in the catchment area for Polnaki. It is in fact a Dalbeattie Primary School. And I think according to the parents, Polnaki, which I think has got the mid-teen numbers of students, would enable its viability to be made more solid. So I know all the processes have been properly followed, and I can't complain about any aspect of this closure. But I suppose what I'm asking is that we perhaps introduce a wee bit more flexibility in these sort of situations and enable even things like catchment areas to be very quickly redrawn to suit the circumstances here. Thank you.
Whenever, sorry, I should say thank you for your question. I think it's worth noting that of the 5 children that were anticipated to start at Polnaki in August, one of which was not catchment and has chosen to go to their catchment school. 3 have chosen to go elsewhere, and only 1 child has chosen to go to Auchinleck. I think this comes down to school transport, and I think that's a service that we know is under pressure, even more so this year. So we do take parents' views on board, but we have to marry that, we have to weigh that up with the availability of other services. In this instance, we looked at where the majority of catchment children are choosing to attend, the routes of travel, and then onward travel to secondary school as well, because Auchinleck is ultimately a feeder for Kirkcudbright Primary School, so we have to factor in a number of instances. You're absolutely right, the schools did come together for a period of time when there was an unforeseen staff absence, but we do have to weigh up a number of factors when we come to deciding a temporary catchment area for a school. That will obviously all be looked at as part of the statutory consultation and ultimately where a final catchment area is decided upon.
Thank you for that. You happy with that, Councillor? Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm hoping you're going to let me just hook this in here. It's actually regarding Pen Punt Primary. And the reason I'm bringing it in here at this point, and it's just to raise awareness, is because the community are they're very frightened that the loss of the third teacher will lead to the closure of their school. And they feel that this has been done to lead us down that road. You'll be aware that the estate strategy has the list of ideally having 3 classes per school. That's one of the aspects that we've agreed to. Now, I've got a lot of sympathy for this school because they are 1 pupil away from that third teacher, and they are led to believe that there is a pupil who would like to come to the school, not at the start of the next school term, but they have been told that there won't be a place for them. And it ties in with something I've said for a long time now, that if we don't go and talk to these communities about things like this, other people will. And we're being led, well, the parents here are being led down the route that they think this is us trying to close their school by stealth, when in actual fact it's quite a healthy school of 50 pupils. And that's absolutely not something that's been suggested by this committee. Now, what they are asking is for somebody from the Education Department to go out and speak to them, and they have asked, and they've been denied that. So is it possible that the Education Department can go out and speak to them and reassure them of what's going to happen and what possibilities will happen should this other child move to the school in January, because ultimately that would then make 3 teacher classes and involve more rejigging for the community, when in actual fact the children are more settled. Thank you.
Well, as you know, Councillor Stevenson, this is not related to this item and you're being a little bit naughty here, but I will allow the director to come in and just give a short explanation here.
Thank you very much, and we are aware, we have been communicating with this community, Parent Council, individual members of the Community Council for some time. We were invited to a meeting at very short notice and we were not able to attend. I am happy to engage with the community as to what the rules and responsibilities are with regards to a school of less than 50. There are, as you know, and as all the community know, 14 schools in exactly the same position who are losing a class this year. And it's really important to me and to everyone listening here that we treat all our schools equally and fairly and transparently. So we have certainly not denied a meeting. We just could not attend at the short notice, but I'm happy to do that over the recess. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gillian. So you got that in public. Do we have any other questions? Oh, Councillor Dempster, you wish in?
Just funny enough, Paula speaking about Ben Puntits, and my word, one of my schools, and I would certainly endorse the views that Paula expressed. I always think when we do very stringent things, it takes away flexibility, so it'd be useful if we could consider that. But I was going to just address the point that Councillor Young raised, and again, it's a word issue for me. If we could reconfigure the school transport arrangements into a different region, we could actually make a saving on one of the routes in my ward. So I would agree with Councillor Young if changing the school transport in our school represents a saving, but we just can't continue making changes on an ad hoc basis. That should be a policy arrangement. So I would be happy to see 2 new policies being developed: flexibility where schools reach a capacity of 50 or thereabouts, and where we can make savings in relation to where we transport pupils to. Thanks for that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster, and I understand your comments, but we need a number. You know, if we don't have that number, what number do we have, and when's that number not the right number, you know, when it comes to pupils per teachers? So that hence why we need to have this number. I'm saying number a lot. But yes, I totally understand as well. But do you want to come in, Gillian, with the second point?
With regards to transport?
To be honest with you, Councillor Dempster, I'm not actually quite sure what you were asking. I know you were talking about, in one hand, about flexibility, in the other hand, how we need to be stricter. So it was a bit confusing.
What I was saying was, Councillor Young suggested that we simply transport pupils to a different school from one they're zoned to, because that's where parents want their children to attend, which may cost more money on school transport than we currently would spend if we're transporting to the zoned school. And what I was saying was, I have a school where the pupils are zoned to travel 12 miles, but if they travel a mile in the opposite direction, they go to a primary school, and yet we don't do that because it's a different region. And what I'm saying is, if we're going to look at requests such as the one Councillor Young submitted, then we should perhaps look at policy and see where we can make a saving by rezoning pupils to schools, and not just do that on an ad hoc basis because the particular school that Councillor Young referred to is undergoing a statutory consultation. And I know that'll be a huge amount of work, but if there's a saving to be achieved, then maybe we should. Thanks, Chair. And it's not for today. I was making an observation, and it was about considering a change in policy, both in transport, school transport, and where we have a school roll that drops to 50 or below. But it's not a proposal, and it's not for today. It's simply a suggestion that we might want to do that, and we would save ourselves the grief that we're getting, first of all, from parents in Punt and from elected members when there's a school in their area that's gone under a statutory consultation. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor Dempster. Thanks for your comments. As you said, it's not for today, but something that perhaps that we can look to at a future date. But you did also, with a very pertinent point, that it will be a huge amount of work. So it's something maybe we need to consider at a later date. But thank you very much for your comments. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Fine, well, I will go to recommendations. 1, note the community engagement undertaken, and 2, agree to the commencement of the statutory consultation process for the closure of Polnackie Primary School. Okay. On to item number 16, Civic Affairs Annual Report 2024-25. We have Liz Manson here to assist if members have any questions. Liz, do you have any extra note? Nothing to add to the report. I'd just like to add some rather nice photographs in that report. It was nice to see all the work that our members are doing out and about. So, do members have any questions? Councillor Stitt.
Thanks, Chair. It's maybe I've been getting complaints for the public of Nolbeatty, especially when it comes to VE Day, and even last Monday night, when they a week past Monday, they raised the flag for armed forces, that the Union Jack's never been hung in the town hall. Even last year for VE Day celebrations, I came back for holiday, and around about the June time, and the Union Jack was never flown, and some of the armed forces and some of the public, nobody weren't very happy about it. Was just that maybe in future you can maybe tell me raise the flag.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stitt. I know we have certain dates throughout the year that flag has to be raised, and Liz will look into that. Any other questions from members? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm looking at you. I wonder if it would be possible, we've had various reports previously. We had Armed Forces report, we had a youth report previously. I wonder if it's time to have an annual province report to really see what you get up to every year.
I don't know if that's a request or a threat. I'm not sure. You want to know what I would get up to over the year? If that's something that members want, I am happy to produce that. But I think the difference is that there is no province budget, so there's no requirement for us to let members know what's happening with it. But still happy to highlight. Personally, I think it's quite a good thing because it's nice to highlight, because not only when I was provost before, it wasn't just the civic events, there was lots of community events and lots of things going on around the Dumfries in this Dale area that I would attend, and it's really good to highlight all that work that's going on. But Liz, what would you have to say about this?
I'm sure we'll be very happy to support you in sharing with elected members as appropriate what your annual activities are.
Just means I'm going to have to take a lot of photographs now. But thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor Dempster.
Just to pay tribute to our staff, Chairman, I see we had a 75th gala, Connell Killam Children's Gala, where ward manager in attendance, and the Kirkconnell Activity and Resource Centre 50th anniversary of convener Malcolm Johnson attended. So it's great to see them support, or see the council supporting milestones in the organisations that we offer support to, and it's nice to see that council officials and indeed leaders of the council show face as well. It just illustrates how much we support the work that volunteers and staff do across the region. Thank you.
No, that's great, Councillor Dempster, and I suppose it's also up to us as members to highlight some of these things to the Civic Department, so that indeed we can get someone along or support in some way the hard work a lot of these organisations do. So do we have any other questions? I don't see anything online neither. So, okay, we'll go to the recommendations. And just members are asked to approve the Civic Affairs Annual Report for 2024-25. Thank you. Thanks, Liz. 17, surplus property in Dumfries and Galloway, and we have Colin Freeman, online, to assist members. Hello, Colin. Do you have anything to add to the report?
Good afternoon, Chair. Nothing to add to the report, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Don't have anything in the room or online. That was a very quick committee appearance, Colin. So we'll go to recommendations. 1, note the Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing Directorate, who are responsible for these assets and no longer has a requirement for them. Note the 5 policy intent themes contained within the Council's disposal and acquisitions policy, included as background papers in the report, and note the background, history and correct position regarding these assets, and agree the 2 assets as noted at paragraphs 4.1 and 4.2 and shown in appendices 1 and 2 are surplus to the requirements of Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing Directorate. So, agenda item number 18, the service review, the community planning and engagement. We have Liz Manson again here. Anything to add to that report, Liz?
Just one comment, thank you, which is, although I'm presenting the report to you today, you'll see that it was co-authored by Annie Johnson, who was the Directorate Development Manager. She has moved on to another post out with the Council. So it was really just to give you the reassurance that there has been a degree of independence in undertaking the review, and hopefully that gives you some comfort and reassurance, although it's me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, Chair. Unfortunately, it's not a good comment. On page 408, I'm not going to read these out because I don't actually think they should be in the papers, to be perfectly honest, and I'm really disappointed they are. On page 408, halfway down, there is the negative comment included. And again, there is another one on 411, there's a negative comment. Now, I don't suspect these were made by members of the public. I don't think they were made by elected members. I'd be very surprised. We've got a protocol in place. I don't remember when we done the Chief Executive review that we saw negative comments like this on the senior leadership team, although I'm sure we would all welcome that report. It would be very insightful. I am disappointed, and I would like to add the recommendation of 2.5 to note the disappointment among elected members that HR comments were included in feedback and made public. And I would just like the assurance that this isn't going to happen again, and it won't happen to anybody else, because if we can do this to the community planning and engagement team, we can do this to any departments. But were the comments made from staff, other staff? Because I would assume there's a process for the staff to follow in that circumstance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. I am 100% behind you. As you know, these papers were published directly after, just very quickly after I became the chair of this committee. I didn't have a chance to scrutinise them completely, look over them completely. And when I did, these comments were something that I highlighted to the director as well, because I'm not impressed. I don't think we should have these things out there. I think it's demoralising. I think when we're trying to, our staff, this particular staff, work very hard in our communities, and I see the communities give positive feedback. And if this has been staff member against another staff member, of course, the comments themselves should be looked into internally, but I do not think these should have been public. But thank you for that. But I would have no issue about adding something as long as other members agree. But do you wish anything to go, a question to go to Liz, or is this just noting?
To be fair, I've always thought the community planning and engagement team have been fantastic. They're certainly my first protocol if I've got any issues in council, and just to put on record, thank you for the work that they do. Thank you.
I would think that the majority of members agree with you, but the majority of community organisations agree also. But no, thank you. Any other questions? No, well, I'll go. Liz, do you want to come in now?
It was simply to say that, yes, we do receive hundreds of positive comments, and thank you for those today. But I think we did recognise that this was a comment that was given to us in the customer survey of council officers. And so one officer does have a very different perception of the service. And, we feel it valid to share with you where we've had positive comments. And therefore, for balance, I think these negative comments were also included. And for us, I think the reason we're comfortable with that is that it highlights the importance of the work that we do continuously about behaviours and styles, different people's perceptions. So thank you for your comments, but I want to reassure you that the staff are able to deal with negative comments and address them in the same spirit that we do with positive ones. But thank you for your positive support.
Can I, from the chair, ask a question then? Were staff members, this particular group of staff members, aware of these comments before they were published, or did they just come across them?
No, we certainly made sure that the staff saw the whole of the draft report, and we had a team development session as well, talking through some of the findings that were received from the customer surveys.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Again, I would echo the sentiments that Paula expressed, because I too find the team particularly helpful. And I don't think these comments, the problem is if we discuss this for too long, it'll become a media issue, and we don't want that either. But I think what we should do is ask for these phrases to be deleted simply as a matter of course, and it should be I understand, a lesson learning process, but it's never great when you criticise either colleagues or staff in public, and that's where this document is. And I would suggest maybe we should just have it deleted or removed from the record or something like that, because it is somebody's opinion, and we take that opinion, but we don't necessarily need to promote it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster. I'm full agreement. Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's important we have a balanced report, but I'll obviously concur that the community planning team is doing a great job. But I've got a question on the recommendations on page 384, and number 3 of the recommendation talks about the model of the 12 ward officers, within each electoral ward, offering a single point of contact and support to local communities. Just like to know more detail about what sort of change in the role is expected of our ward officers, and just an assurance that they'll be continued to support members and the local community in the way that they're doing at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Do you have something for that, Liz? Thank you.
Thank you, yes. So as recommendation 3 does highlight that one of the pieces of evidence that we have is that the model of having a ward officer for each ward has been a success, and we certainly will be continuing that so that there is a single point of contact and support for community groups, councillors and partners. So thank you for your comments on that, and yes, the reassurance that that will continue.
Thank you, Liz. Do we have any other questions?
Happy with that.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Any other questions? Go to recommendations then. Members asked to note the research and evidence which has informed the analysis, findings and recommendations as referenced in paragraph 4.9 and detailed in Appendix 1. Consider the analysis and findings summarised at paragraph 4.10 and detailed in Appendices 2 to 4 and agree any additions or amendments. Agree the recommendations set out in paragraph 4.10.12, subject to any additions or amendments, and note the next steps to implement the committee decisions as set out in paragraphs 4.10, 15.410, well, there's a lot of points and a lot of things. Anyway, I'll just get a minute, a wee sec, but I need to speak to Councillor Stevenson first. What do you require in there? Do you still require the your additional recommendation?
Yeah, if you're taking the comments out, that's fine, but if not, at 2.5, note the disappointment amongst elected members that, because they are HR comments, were included in the feedback.
So there's, if we don't take the comments out, we take the comments out, if they're removed, then you're content with the paper as is? Yeah.
We can certainly look to redact it for the copy that's retained. Thank you.
And Councillor Dempster, you wish to come back in?
No, if they're going to be removed, I'm happy. I'll endorse what Paula has proposed. I was just going to ask her if she would add that particular requirement onto her additional amendment, but I'm happy if that's been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster. So are all members agreed with the removal or the redacting of these comments? Thank you. So we go on to agenda item number 19, any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due to a need for a decision, and I've got no business deemed urgent. So we moved on to item 20, Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Consider adoption of resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A, brackets 4 and paragraph 6, 8 and 9 of part 1 of schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Are members in agreement? Thank you. Okay, so those online, could you move to the separate Teams link?